Good evening. We're going to call to order the Trinity County Planning Commission meeting on November 9th, 2023 at 6:03 PM. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We're now going to open public comment. During the public comment period, members of the public may address the Planning Commission on any matter not listed on the agenda that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. Do we have any public comment from the room? Any public comment on Zoom? Thank you. At this time, we will close public comment and move on to the regular calendar. Item 1, minutes. Approve minutes of the October 12th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting. Do we have any comments or a motion regarding the minutes?
I'll make a motion.
Commissioner Barrett,
Make a motion to approve the minutes as stated.
do we have a second?
I'll second that.
So we have a motion by Commissioner Barrett, a second by Commissioner Ellis. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. We will move on to agenda item 2. Annual Initial Variance Request, CCV-23-07. An initial commercial cannabis cultivation request of the Planning Commission to reduce the required 350 feet cultivation setback from a neighboring residential structure pursuant to Trinity County Code 17.43.050A, paragraph 8. The project site is located at 211 Old Poker Bar Road, Douglas City, California. APN 025-150-004-000. Applicant B. Lohr. Staff?
Good evening, Commissioners. As stated in the memo, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission continue this item to the December 14th Planning Commission meeting because of the hundreds and hundreds of notices that our admin staff mails out. This one was accidentally left out, not taken lightheartedly, but because we don't meet that specific Trinity County Code section for noticing hearings, I'm recommending that we continue it to the next meeting where I'll present a complete staff report for you.
So do you need us to open and close a public hearing or do we
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Thank you.
So we will open a public hearing on agenda item 2. Do we have any public comment in the room or on Zoom?
No.
No public comment. We will close the public hearing and bring it back to the board for a motion to continue this item till the December 14th meeting. Any commissioners care to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we postpone the item number 2 to the December 14th meeting.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second. So motion by Commissioner Heaton, second by Commissioner Barrett to continue this item till December 14th, 2023. All those in favor, please, or is this a roll call? No. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 4-0. Thank you.
We will move on to agenda item 3. General plan, vision and guiding principle statements. A request to the Planning Commission to recommend to the Board of Supervisors the vision and guiding principle statements for the General Plan 2050. Location countywide, presenter Minter Harnish. Staff?
Go ahead, Michael.
Or I can jump in here.
Go ahead.
Yep. Good evening, Commission. Good to be with all of you tonight. To give just a little bit of background, what we're doing is we are revisiting the general plan vision statement and associated guiding principles as part of the 2050 Trinity County general plan. You might be asking, we've seen these before. This is nothing new. We actually provided comments on this previously, and you are correct. So previously we brought this forward to a Planning Commission meeting where the Planning Commission provided feedback and direction, or should I say feedback to go to the board. But as part of that meeting, there was not a formal recommendation and action by the Planning Commission. So when the item was brought to the board decided, since there was no formal action by the Planning Commission, which is necessary as part of this effort, since the Planning Commission is the land use arm of the county, that this needed to come back down to all of you tonight so that we can actually get a formal recommendation and roll call vote from the Planning Commission. So as part of this presentation tonight, I'm going to take the first portion, which is on the vision statement and guiding principles. I'm going to run through this fairly quickly, remind you of the process that we went through in regards to the vision statement and guiding principles, the different iterations that have happened along the way, including all the public comment that was facilitated. And then on the screen here, we'll show you the recommended vision statement for the 2050 general plan, as well as the recommended guiding principles. Now, these recommendations that I'm going to show on the screen, these include all of the feedback that was provided by you, the Planning Commission, previously about 2 months ago. So this is just showing you again the finalized version that is recommended based off your prior feedback. And then what we'll do is I'll hand it back to the chair and hopefully facilitate a formal recommendation to the board. So next slide, please. Next one. So just to reiterate, you probably can all recite this in your sleep at this point, but a vision statement, why is it important? A general plan needs a set of guideposts. It needs a basic direction that the county is looking to move forward in. And so a vision statement, like a goal statement, that's part of almost every general plan. It allows the different goals and policies, any land use changes that come out of the general plan, eventually programs and the EIR to align with a single common goal in mind. So vision statements, they're aspirational, they're future forward looking. And as part of this plan, we're looking out to a horizon year of 2050. So we're looking at around a 30-year time frame. And this vision is meant to be the overarching umbrella of the general plan. So as part of this, the vision statement has gone through several iterations. It's received a whole host of community feedback as part of this effort, and shown here on the screen includes all of the steps that the consultant team, along with county staff and the community at large, has gone through. This started back in 2023, where all of the vision concepts were pulled together based off a series of different community engagement events that have been facilitated as part of this effort, dating back all the way to the first initiation community workshop that was held out at the Performing Arts Center in Weaverville. Back in June, we took all of the feedback from the community members and brought it forward to our focus groups. Our focus groups are an advisory set of individuals on specific topic areas that are within the general plan. These focus groups were created at the direction of the board way at the beginning of the project. And as part of that, we ran the different concepts and visions that the community came forward with, or buzzwords that the community felt Trinity County should lean in towards over the next 30 years, and provided those initial concepts to the focus groups. They then provided their feedback, and we created revisions to some initial concepts that were then brought forward to the commission back in August. The commission weighed in. We went through all of the draft, or what were recommended different vision statements moving forward that captured a majority of the public comments that were solicited as part of this process, and then went through an in-depth conversation with all of you on different edits, modifications, or different expectations that you may have as a commission in regards to the end result of the vision statement and the guiding principles. That's where we landed in October. So in October, we compiled all of the Planning Commission's comments, worked them into the vision statement and guiding principles, and then had formal recommendations to the board that then were kicked back down because a formal action wasn't taken at that August meeting. So we're back here today. Next slide. So I'm not going to read through these. I'm just putting these up for historical reference. So there's a clear delineation of where we went through this process and how we got back here tonight. So there were a series of vision statements. There was an option 1, option 2, and then an option 3. Each of these options are actually included within the agenda packet tonight, if you would like to reference those. From those 3 options, we brought those forward to the Planning Commission, where the Planning Commission made some modifications and tweaks, and then what resulted in a recommendation, which is on the screen tonight. The countywide vision statement recommendation, I will read this one, states that Trinity County is a place where people can experience a fulfilled life in a peaceful rural setting while allowing for existing and new development to thrive in appropriate ways and locations. It is a place where employment, housing, world-class recreation, and cultural and natural resources opportunities are abundant, where there is a strong sense of community and family, neighbors support neighbors, and residents feel safe and secure. So this was the actual recommendation the Planning Commission decided to move forward with that made its way to the board. Next slide.
So Brent, can I just stop for just a second?
Of course.
So is county council available? No. Well, because my question would be to make this go back to the Board of Supervisors in the format that they need to have it go back. Do we need to adopt the county vision statement first and recommend that, and then go to the guiding principles, or, can we do it all at once?
So we did discuss this actually, and it would be better if we went to the division first and there was a consensus and we're good, and we go to the guiding principles. We go through the guiding principles one at a time. Once we get to the end, we get a consensus on each one, and then at the end, vote on the full acceptance of the vision and the guiding principles at once.
Okay, so at this point, you just need a consensus on the vision statement and each guiding principle? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I'm going to ask if let's see. I'm trying to think how to get the public comment in at the appropriate point. So we'll just wait till the end, do public comment, and then look for consensus on each item.
Sounds good to me.
That sounds good to me. As long as you offer the opportunity for the public comment, we should be good.
Okay. All right. So sorry, Brent. I'm just trying to figure out procedurally how to get you what you need.
No
So-
worries, no worries.
Yeah, please proceed then. Thank you.
Of course. So we're going to shift gears, and we'll come back to the vision statement in just a moment. But Included in a general plan are a set of guiding principles, and think of guiding principles as the next layer down from a vision. So you have a vision statement, which is your overarching pathway forward where the county sees itself by 2050. Then to implement a vision, you have a set of guiding principles. I like to think of these as a set of thematical topics or themes. So guiding principles are pretty much central ideas that articulate how the county is going to implement its vision statement moving forward. These guiding principles then make their way throughout the general plan, because a general plan needs to be consistent internally and with other county documents. So as part of that, the future elements within the general plan, any future land use changes that arise from the general plan, the environmental impact report, all need to be consistent with where the vision is heading and where each of these guiding principles goes as well. So the guiding principles were created based on community feedback. They were based on 6 different topic areas, which align with the different topics that are anticipated to be part of the 2050 general plan. Next slide. So these next few slides are in a similar format to how we presented the vision. Planning Commission has already seen these options for each of the different topic areas. Pardon me, I'm coughing. These options based on the different topic areas were brought forward. The Planning Commission reviewed these options back in August of 2023, provided feedback, and then we ended up with a single guiding principle recommendation for each of these. So the first topic is hazards and safety. After Planning Commission review, the formal recommendation for the hazards and safety guiding principle stated to provide for safe communities through resilient infrastructure, community-wide education and preparation, effective coordination with state and federal agencies, and hazard planning. There's a double that in there, we should remove that. That includes managing lands to reduce the impacts of climate-related, natural, and human-caused disasters, including wildland fires, flooding, and geological events. So this would be the formal recommendation, or this was the recommendation that was made to the board by the Planning Commission for inclusion within the general plan. And this would be the guiding principle related to hazards and safety. Next one. So originally there were 3 different options for a guiding principle that related to community health. Now, just as a reminder, just like with the vision, and the vision went through the focus groups and they provided their feedback, so did the guiding principle. So the focus groups, which is that citizen advisor group, they reviewed all of these as well before they made it to the commission. So I just want to make sure that community feedback, the focus groups all made it into these options that the Planning Commission back in August reviewed. So the recommended guiding principle related to community health and health services by the Planning Commission was to promote economic, social, and physical health and wellness by investing in infrastructure and services that promote physical activity and access to healthy foods, help reduce health disparities, and integrate public health into public policies and the community. Next one. This guiding principle focuses on land use, housing, and zoning. On the screen were the 2 options that were originally provided to the Planning Commission. And after discussion in August, this is the recommended guiding principle related to this topic. And it states, identify additional land for future development while ensuring the compatibility of adjoining land uses, incentivizing new development, returning vacant and abandoned properties to active use, increasing affordable housing options, improving resiliency to wildfire through defensible space, home hardening, and fuel management, and emphasizing collaborative approaches to housing challenges. This guiding principle focuses on mobility and infrastructure that spans everything from roadways and travel, circulation, to different services that are provided through different infrastructure networks. The recommended guiding principle from the Planning Commission back in August stated, invest in and develop an efficient and safe multimodal transportation network. Some might ask what multimodal means. That just means it looks beyond the use of a vehicle. It looks at all forms of transportation. So invest in and develop an efficient and safe multimodal transportation network with infrastructure and services that meet the needs of residents and businesses. Maintain and enhance law enforcement and fire protection services to protect residents and property, and enhance availability and reliability of communications infrastructure to residents and businesses. The next guiding principle focuses on the natural environment, so watersheds and the natural resources within the county. So there were three options. Planning Commission recommendation was to the board to conserve, develop, and sustainably manage the county's open spaces and natural resources with expanded opportunities for residents and visitors to enjoy the county's heritage and natural setting. Promote the availability and accessibility of recreation sites, entertainment opportunities, waterways, and state and federal lands to all residents and visitors. Next topic focuses on economic development. Those were the three options that were brought forth to the focus group, and then the recommended action on a guiding principle to the board by the Planning Commission states: maintain a high level of coordination and collaboration within the local business community to incentivize business development and employment opportunities, to encourage economic growth, and retain capital within the community. Strategically distribute resources for economic development throughout all communities in the county, and expand educational and workforce development opportunities to create a range of jobs across diverse industries.
Okay, thank you for that presentation.
You're welcome.
So at this time, we will open this up to agenda item 4, up to public comment on the vision and guiding principles for the general plan. Do we have any public comment in the room? Any public, oh, sorry.
I have to make it official, I suppose. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the commission, Tom Belenko, Douglas City. I actually just want to comment on, I think, something that we removed from, I forget whether it was a vision or guiding principle last time, and I didn't see it this time. And it's not that I don't think it didn't really fit. It was about food and food production, I think. And it was just kind of disturbing. I don't deny that we don't produce even enough foodstuffs to feed ourselves. But since we're talking about vision and aspiration, it just makes me more comfortable to know, given our geography and we're looking out 20 years, 30 years, I'd like us to keep an eye towards what can we do, even if it's, you know, inspiring family gardens. I feel like we do have valuable resources here, and we do have maybe some avenues to exploit that we're not looking at. I know we have some livestock. You know, I'm a vegan here, so don't let me tell you about meat crops, but take, for instance, goats. I think, you know, goats in our landscape are great for fuel suppression. They're fire protection. They're not, from what I've heard, I have not ever eaten one. I don't think they're the choicest eating, but I do know that they're very lean. I know that a great percentage of the population of the world, they are their meat animal. So maybe there's something to exploit there. Goat milk, goat-based cheeses are very popular. I just hope that we could, if we're talking about vision, not give away food. Like let's think about how Trinity County could at the very least have some semblance of food security where we could feed ourselves if we needed to. Maybe we're not exporting it to the world, but it sure would be great if we, you know, if we're going to try and promote one or two or a couple of the agricultural commodities. We certainly have world-class timber. Obviously, we like to think we have world-class cannabis. I sure hope we do. It would be nice if there's something else around that. I think our wines are competitive in California. I know some of them have won some awards. So anyway, that's just my comment. I'd like to see food in there somewhere. Otherwise, I think this is a good undertaking, and you know, like every general plan meeting, I wish there were more people, but so be it. Thank you.
Thank you. I can't find it either, Tom. Yeah, but it's not in any of the proposals. Anyway, any public comment on Zoom? I was listening. I was flipping through as you were talking. I wasn't ignoring you in case you were wondering why I was like flip, flip, flip.
I'm not sure how this happens.
Pat, go ahead. Oh,
Yeah, Pat Frost, 171 Grizzly Lane, Trinity Center, California. And I just wanted to say that I think that the effort on the vision and guiding principles is pretty sound. Certainly understand what Tom's talking about. One nitpicky little thing I think it was the vision statement where it says fulfilled. That just sounds so past tense, like we are done and gone. Maybe fulfilling might be a better use of that word. But anyway, that's it.
That's a good point.
So it would read Trinity County is a place where people can experience a fulfilling life. Okay, thank you
Correct.
for that public comment. Do we have any other public comment on Zoom? Okay, so we will close public comment and bring it back to the commission. So our first item is the vision statement. So that is on page 10 of our packet. So this was what we recommended to the Board of Supervisors in August. So do we have any discussion on the vision statement?
I did like that comment that Pat mentioned there about having an experience that's a fulfilled life versus or fulfilling life versus a fulfilled life.
Commissioners?
Agree.
Okay.
I agree.
So the consensus I'm hearing is on the vision statement is that we would be in general approval of the vision statement on page 10 with the change from fulfilled to fulfilling.
Sounds good to me.
Yes? Okay.
Great to me.
So then the guiding principles, I'm still looking for food. Do we have any changes to the recommendation for hazards and safety on page 13, other than to take out the second N in planning? So the consensus is that that one looks okay?
I think it is.
Did you mention the spelling, the grammar mistake, the two that's
Two that's.
after
Yes.
hazard planning?
Yes.
Oh, that.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
So planning is spelled correctly. Okay, so correction, delete one that. Community health and health services. This one, it does mention access to healthy foods, which we have. We have physical activity and access to healthy foods. I don't see local food though. Okay, so do we have any changes to community health and health services?
I think like you said, the sustainable foods. Something like that.
Yeah, I was looking where that might have been taken out somewhere else, but I don't see it anywhere else.
Well,
There-
one of the thoughts though that I was actually having a conversation with this just the other day with some guys in Ruth, but it was like, because talking about community health and health services, the ancient doctors used to say food is health or is medicine. And I used to have some serious food allergies and stuff like that, and it was through healthy, organic, nutritious food that is what brought me back. And it's like to where now I can eat the garbage that I ate like I did tonight, but it doesn't affect me.
So I think I found what Tom was talking about. If you look at page 22, where we're talking about economic development, option 3 said the county's economy will expand, diversify, and strengthen its role globally as a source of food and agricultural commodities. That's what we took out. So I think we're talking two different issues. Where we took out our global role as a source of food and agricultural commodities, that's one issue, versus what is being suggested, that we promote essentially our local food sources.
Correct.
Okay.
Because we'll never be a global producer of food, but I agree.
Well, would it work if we said promote economic, social, and physical health and wellness by investing in infrastructure and services that promote physical activity, local food sources, and access to healthy foods? Is that what you want to do?
That's agreeable.
What do you think?
So I kind of think healthy foods actually satisfies it to me. It's not, we're not rejecting anything in here. We're just not making a statement that I agree it was in there. We took it out because of the global thing. So I don't see it necessary to put in there, but I just don't think it's necessary. I think it's redundant.
I can agree with that.
Okay. So we'll leave it the way it is. Is that the consensus for community health and health services?
Chair,
Yes.
if I may. Hi. I think the point here that Tom, which I don't want to speak for you, but maybe trying to make is the local aspect of making sure that the vision and the guiding principles, promote and protect local food systems. I think that's more maybe what he's getting at, which I could see a purpose in that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And I think that because it's our county's vision statement, that's what it implies. That's what I think. I think it implies that we're talking about us and what we do.
I always have a fear of implications as I've read ordinances that have lost their translation over the years. That's my only hesitation there, that it's clearly translated and protected in the future.
Like,
I mean, yeah, when I worked for Cooperative Extension, that was one of our big things, is local food systems. You can have healthy food, you can have organic food that comes from, China or something. So do you want to somehow promote local food systems? If there's some sort of global disaster and your food supply network disappears, do you have any access to local foods or any promotion of local foods? It's kind of, there's a little bit of a difference between healthy and local food systems.
Yeah.
I have a comment. Could that be better served in the economic section? The promotion.
Where we took it out initially. I like it a little better under community health and health services. If it was saying, because it's broad enough, it's promoting economic, social, and physical health and wellness. So it is economic by investing in infrastructure and services that promote physical activity, local food systems.
What about just putting it in, adding everything or leaving everything is, and then it says physical activity and access to local healthy foods? What if we were to do something of that nature?
Okay. What do you guys think?
Right.
Okay. So I think the consensus is for community health and health services on page 15 that we would insert local before healthy foods. Page 17, land use, housing and zoning. Any changes there?
I think it's good.
Looks good as is.
Yes.
And mobility and infrastructure.
I think that's good as is.
That's good.
We did just such a good job the first time around. Okay, watersheds and natural resources.
I have one. I would like to change on the very first, where it says conserve, develop, and sustainably manage the county's open spaces. I would like to see it say sustainably manage, develop, and conserve. Because it's like we have all these natural resources that are there, and it was like, yeah, we can, I would like to see sustainably manage over the conservation part, because it's like that's putting jobs ahead of just putting that. That's how I just interpret it. Is like where I could see it's like if we're sustainably managing something and then have it on the conservation side afterwards. If we're wise, being a wise steward of our natural resources and everything else, it was like the conservation part will take place as well. But it's like I'd like to see the sustainably managed in front of the develop and then conserve.
Okay, yeah, I mean, to me, they're all equal but any thoughts?
I think from a bookend perspective, I think he's right. I think, but then I go all the way to it should be sustainably developed, conserved. If you're going to go that route, if
Well,
the conservation, I mean, it's just putting it in an order that makes more sense. Because if you're going to be managing it, you're going to be developing it.
Not
And-
necessarily.
The point of conservation.
I mean, you can manage property without developing it,
Right.
you know, if you're,
Okay.
okay. Commissioner Barrett, any thoughts?
I'm agreeable with as is, but I also respect Commissioner Heaton's thoughts, and I'm agreeable with either.
I really don't care either. They're in there. It's all that matters.
Okay, so I think for that one, we are going to say sustainably manage, conserve, and develop the county's open spaces and natural resources.
I'm good.
Sounds good. It's not raining out there, is it? Let's see.
And last one, economic development.
I'm good.
I think it looks good.
Okay. All right, so we are going to go back to the vision statement on page 10. And I'm looking for a motion to recommend to the Board of Supervisors that they adopt the countywide vision statement with the change from fulfilled to fulfilling.
Make a motion.
Motion by Commissioner Barrett,
I'll second it.
second by Commissioner Heaton. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Then for the guiding principles, can we just adopt the guiding principles
In its entirety.
uh, as amended?
Yes.
Okay. I'm looking for a motion to adopt the guiding principles. A motion that we recommend that the Board of Supervisors adopt the guiding principles as amended.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Commissioner Heaton, second by
Second that.
Commissioner Ellis. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so does that get the Board of Supervisors what they need on vision and guiding principles?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Great. Thank you, Commission, and I will hand it over to Michael, Chair, when you want to facilitate the next part.
okay, community and area plan determination. And for those of you following along, we're on page 27 of the agenda item packet.
Would this be now item number 4?
Oh,
Is that what it is?
my apologies. So, yeah, we're still on,
Yeah, well,
we have completed agenda item 3. Thank you, Commissioner Heaton. And we are moving on to agenda item 4. General plan, community plan, area determinations. A request of the Planning Commission to recommend to the Board of Supervisors which communities will have an individual or a specific community plan and which communities will become part of an area plan as part of the General Plan 2050. Location countywide, presenter Minter Harnish. And Michael, I believe you have this presentation. Thank you.
Yes. Well, good evening, Chair and Commissioners. It's a pleasure to present to you again this evening. This, to me, is getting to the really exciting part of this project, and it's looking at community-specific changes and effective ways to implement them. And so early on in this general plan process, there was the discussion to include and revise the community plans. That was not initially part of the general plan project, but hearing from residents that it was important that additional community plans be added, the board approved the addition of 5 more community plans. So to start that process off, in June through July of 2023, we held our second round of focus group meetings, and that was to touch on the vision and guiding principles, and also to start to introduce this idea of the community and area plan concepts. Following the focus group meetings, our team then developed an interactive online survey through an online provider that allowed residents to essentially map their own community and determine the boundaries of their community, knowing that boundary determination is not just a geographical, but it's a political and also ideological decision. So we went through the draft countywide vision and guiding principles. Those were initially developed in July of 2023. And fast forward to August 2023, we presented our initial findings from our online survey, our interactive survey, to the board. And in that presentation, they had offered a recommendation, and that was in September of this year. They had offered a recommendation based off of the initial feedback that we had received and working with staff to come up with determining which communities would either get an area plan or a community plan. But before we can get into the topic of community plans, it's important to understand what is existing today. So on the ground today, the county has a general plan that is the overarching document, the blueprint for various land use, economic, mobility decisions countywide. Within that general plan, there are a set, as of today, there are a set of community plans, and there are a total of 5, and they are for they exist for the cities of the communities of Weaverville, Lewiston, Junction City, Hayfork, and Douglas City. Those are the only 5 communities today that have a community plan. So then on the right side, we see all of the communities that are not covered by a community plan. But it's important to note that just because these communities aren't currently covered by a community plan doesn't mean that they're left out of the planning process, doesn't mean that they don't get considered in the regional planning efforts as part of the general plan. They are considered, it's just not as the specific level as a community plan gets into. So in order to offer a recommendation to staff and to the Planning Commission and board as to which communities should get a community or area plan, we developed criteria and we developed a system and a methodology, and it ended up turning into kind of a scoring system, if you will. And that system consisted of metrics, which really enabled us to have comparisons between communities, but at an objective level. So we looked at objective things on the ground, and those included population, access to school, post office locations, if there was any landmarks or unique identifiers, and medical services. So we looked at all these metrics, and we looked at all of the remaining communities that are not covered by a community plan, and went through the process of documenting each of their kind of uniqueness. And this is the results of that effort. So on the left-hand side, we have the community in alphabetical order, followed by the population. As you can see, there are some that do not have a population that is unknown. That means the census does not have an estimate for these communities. And then in the middle are the metrics that we looked at, the services and the amenities. So we looked at schools, like I said, and post offices, fire stations. And essentially, if a community had one of those items, they would have received an X in the box. And after going through all of these communities, we ended up adding up the services for each community. And that ended up really being kind of the antithesis of our recommendation. So that being said, there is probably now the question as to what is the difference between a community plan and an area plan. And I'm going to say not much. Community plans, however, are specific to a community, so a single community, and they are consistent with the overall general plan, but they provide further goals and policies specific to development in that community based on the uniqueness or of that community, geographical location, opportunity for jobs, economic development. Area plans do that same thing, but on a larger scale, in a larger area, and typically encompass multiple communities. So as we go through the options and the recommendations that we have for you this evening, I want to just keep those two plans very distinct, but also understand that those communities that aren't included in this discussion are still very much covered by the general plan. And so with that, I'll get into the various options that we had come up with. So following the board's direction, option A would consist of preserving the 5 existing community plans that remain in effect today. Those plans would be updated and revised and they would go through the same planning process and same community planning process that we would do for the other communities that we would determine would get a plan. Option A also includes, because we have to get 5, right? So we were directed to produce 5 additional plans for a total of 10. So option A consists of 4 area plans. And those area plans, they are large geographical areas, were broken up into kind of four sections of the county. So we have the downriver communities. They would be covered by an area plan. Same with North Lake, Southern Trinity, and then the Post Mountain communities. Option A also includes the creation of a single community plan for Heimpom. And Heimpom, being that it's geographically isolated, it also had a total of a high scoring total of indicators. And the community, during our community engagement efforts, had noted multiple times throughout that our engagement with them that they really desired a community plan to help guide future development in their community. So option A takes that into consideration. Option B, again, preserves and maintains the 5 existing community plans, but instead of creating 4 area plans, instead creates 4 community plans. Those would be for the communities of Heimpom, Ruth, Mad River, Trinity Center, and then it would be the creation of an area plan, that should say area, my apologies, for the downriver communities. So it would be a larger plan that would take into consideration development decisions in Del Loma, Burnt Ranch, Hawkins Bar, Sawyer. And option C is the board's recommendation. So if you remember back in September, we presented these findings initially to the board, and this was their feedback. They had said initially when we had started the community planning effort, yes, we wanted 5 additional plans, but it might be too much. And so instead the board reduced the total number of plans to 8, meaning we had 3 more communities or 3 plans that we had to distribute. And so option C, the board recommended that there would be the creation of just 3 community plans: Heimpom, Post Mountain, and Trinity Center. Following our meeting with the board, following community feedback and internal discussions with county staff and planning staff, we developed an additional option, and that would be option D. And option D is our recommended option. And it starts with the 5 community plans. Again, we'll retain those, we'll update those. We will take the board's recommendation to reduce the number of plans to 8 as opposed to 10. And we recommend the creation of 2 community plans, one for Heimpom, one for Post Mountain, and the creation of 1 area plan that we would call the North Lake Area Plan. And this would include the communities of Trinity Center, Minersville, and Covington Mill. So I will hand it back to the chair for questions and then subsequent discussion.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for the consultant? I would like to point out that the metrics, the community plan metrics for the North Lake are incorrect. For example, Minersville does not have a fire station. They don't have any commercial uses. I'm not sure what landmark and unique identifiers they have, but Covington Mill, according to the online survey, has the Bowerman Barn, which is on the National Register of Historic Places. So I'm kind of wondering if you don't have those 2 communities confused. Anyway, it's just the metrics, to me, I saw inaccuracies, which made me concerned that that's what one of the things that we were using in coming up with where we should have community plans.
Ruth doesn't have a post office anymore either.
Hmm.
We lost that one a couple years ago.
So how was this community plan metrics created? Was it done from the online survey, or did the consultant develop that table?
So yes, for both. As part of the online survey, we asked community members to identify assets, opportunities within their communities. And some of that feedback was pinpointed to specific locations or specific jobs or facilities within those communities. So we looked at that. And we also looked at the hard data. So we looked at the assessor parcel data that we had received at the outset of the project. As part of the data, there are assessor use codes, and those use codes are specific to various land uses that are on the ground today. We use that as a starting point to base these metrics, and then looked at the feedback from the community to better educate the metrics. At least that's how it was developed.
Okay. So if there are no further questions, we'll move into public comment regarding.
I have a
Sorry,
question.
Commissioner Ellis?
Actually, sorry. How does the board recommendation address the downriver communities? And how does your recommendation address the downriver communities?
So the downriver communities, at least in the options that are presented as a starting point for discussion, would be covered. If they weren't included in any of these options, they would still be covered by the general plan. So the general plan would still have goals and policies and specifics. It could get, specific to those communities. So just because they don't get a plan doesn't mean that they're not covered by this planning effort. There was, if we go back to the option A, which was initially presented to the board, there was an option for an area plan for the downriver communities.
I can jump in here
Option B, there was also the recommendation for one community plan for the downriver communities.
And I can jump in here on the board's direction. The reason why the board removed the option for the downriver communities, one, based on geographic distance of the 299 corridor all the way to the county line. Second, each of the communities that run downriver all came back with different interests, different economic interests. They have different uses. And the discussion at the board meeting was that to create a cohesive area plan, that the range of communities downriver, there was such a range that it would water down the community plan, and those communities were better served under the larger umbrella of the general plan rather than trying to create a community plan, because each of these communities had different interests and visions for themselves going forward. That's the reason the majority of these area plan approaches, especially for South County, was broken down. The South County communities, it was actually at the direction of the board member who oversees his district. It was his recommendation, just based on feedback that he heard, and again, all the different communities down there that all had different interests and had different identities. It would be too difficult to try to pull those together into one common consensus area plan. So that's why those were removed as part of the board recommendation. The reason why these three community plans shown here in option C were included, first, because High and Palm was recommended from the beginning based on being geographically isolated. There was a strong desire by the community and was one of the most, if not the most highly attended workshop that we had as part of the workshop series back in November of 2022. And the feedback collected was what was there to substantiate having an area plan. The Post Mountain community came up because Post Mountain is actually the largest population center. And right now it lacks cohesion from a planning perspective. And the board felt it was important, and there was community feedback as well, that Post Mountain needed some sort of clear delineation and direction moving forward for that large population center. And at least at this point, it's missing any commercial or non-residential uses don't exist, and there was a desire to include that there. And the last one was Trinity Center. Trinity Center ranked high on the metric chart. Trinity Center currently has a commercial base, has a residential base, has economic development. It's the hub of the North Lake area, and so the board felt that Trinity Center was, based on all of those different metrics and community desire to create a plan in the Trinity Center area, was the perfect candidate to move forward as part of a community plan. Option D, which is a modification of the board, that came out of our last meeting with the board. And as part of that, there was community feedback that there are smaller communities which encircle or in the region of Trinity Center that consider themselves to be part of Trinity Center. Not just part of it in a subjective community nature, but also in the fact that there are service districts that include some of these smaller communities that are folded into the Trinity Center area. So as part of that, through discussion based off board feedback, based off community feedback, and based off consultation with county staff, we've created this recommendation, option D, which expands, which takes the Trinity Center recommendation from option C, but expands it to include Minersville, to include Covington Mill. So it's a larger regional effort as part of that. So that's where the thought process went from the board now down to the Planning Commission. And the reason why you're seeing it now is because when the board was going through this at their last meeting, they felt it was imperative that they wanted the Planning Commission to weigh in on this point, on this juncture, before these plans are developed. So we're bringing it back down to the Planning Commission just to get your consensus and then a recommendation back up to the board.
Thank you. That helped a lot.
Welcome.
So other commissioners have questions?
No.
So I do want to make it clear a couple things. One is I spoke as a private citizen before the Board of Supervisors and as a resident of the Covington Mill area, which we consider ourselves to be part of Trinity Center, requesting that we have a community plan for Trinity Center. But we specifically requested that that boundary be the community services district, which we'll get to, I think, when we get to community boundaries. So I think there's still a question, however the commission votes, but if they do choose to recommend, like the Board of Supervisors did, that Trinity Center have a community plan, then that boundary is still, I think, up for definition to essentially cover what the consultant is proposing in a North Lake area plan. So the council is not online. So I'm not sure, since I spoke as a private citizen to the Board of Supervisors, asking, for my community that Trinity Center have a community plan, if I need to recuse myself when it comes to voting for which communities have a community plan.
So in my opinion, when I looked at what happened that day, I was in the audience. You were very clearly a member of the community. So we did have discussion after that meeting, and essentially it boiled down to, it doesn't really matter if it's called a community plan or a area plan. It would be Trinity Center and others, but either way, it's fine, and it meets exactly the same end result. So there'd be no reason for you to recuse. And basically, it doesn't matter if it's called a community plan or an area plan, it's still exactly the same thing. Where it would come into play is if it's a larger geographic area. There's only a few miles that separate, and the CSD does actually cover that area. So I don't really see there any reason for a distinction on that. So
Okay.
that's just my opinion on it.
Would also with, since we're just making a recommendation to the, board, we won't have the final say anyhow. So I don't, in my personal opinion is I think you're good.
I agree.
Okay, well, thank you, because I just, I'm a pretty active community member, so, I just want to make sure I'm not crossing the line there.
No, and I would say again, Chair, that essentially what happened was the board said, let's send it back to the planning commission to look at it again. So you could literally sit in the chair position right now and say, this is what I want to do. So really, they didn't make a decision except to send it back to the planning commission to review. So you can still do whatever you want.
Okay, so we have had no further questions. Do we have any public comment on what the community or area plan should be on agenda item 4?
On Zoom, Pat?
Yeah, so this is Pat Frost from 171 Grizzly Lane, Trinity Center. I'm kind of struggling with what comments belong with agenda item 4 versus agenda item 5. They seem to kind of bleed together. So I apologize if I step out of bounds. So I do want to go back to the metric table. You don't have to show it, but there are other errors, in that metric table. It shows Coffee Creek doesn't have a school, and it's had a school for decades. And as somebody who has made his living in science, I always worry when the data into the analysis is flawed, that the analysis is necessarily flawed, and then the conclusions or recommendations may also be somewhat flawed. So I am a little bit worried about that. And the fact that every time I try to Google and try to find the town of Minersville, it takes me to a place where the only beating hearts are smallmouth bass, because the town of Minersville is in the bottom of Trinity Lake. So I'm not sure even what the consultants consider to be the boundaries of Minersville. And thirdly, I would say that who am I to argue with the Board of Supervisors? I would certainly support their recommendation.
Thank you. Any other comments on Zoom? Okay, thank you. We'll bring it back to the commission for a motion. Do commissioners have a preference whether it's option A, B, C, or D?
I think option D is the best one.
In your microphones a little closer, please.
D is what I think would be the best one.
Okay, so that's your motion to, we
Oh, I thought
recommend.
you were asking a question, but yes, I'll make a motion that we select option D as our recommendation
Do
for
we
the
have a-
community area plan.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Yeah, I could second that.
Okay, so discussion. So let me say, so Trinity Center, to the Trinity Center folks, to their mind, includes Minersville and Covington Mill. The North Lake would include, if you were doing an area plan, would include Coffee Creek. But we're not talking about doing a separate plan for Coffee Creek. So if the Trinity Center boundaries are, which is part of the next discussion, are the CSD, then Trinity Center would include Minersville, which should be Ridgeville, and Covington Mill. So if you adopted option C, with the understanding that Trinity Center boundaries include the CSD, then option C would make the most sense for the North Lake.
That's fine with me. If that's what I was looking at for this is the plan is saying that Trinity Center was a larger area. But then if we reflect back to my first question, each thing's covered in the general plan anyway. So this is really for communities that want to be cohesive and in the area and inclusive. And so if you read Trinity Center to include all of those based on the how do you say it? CD?
The Community Service District,
the community
CSD.
Service district, then option C would be the best. If that's what it includes. And that's what you want.
Yeah, and that's the way it was presented to the Board of Supervisors, that Trinity Center, was defined by the Community Services District, that Covington Mill and Minersville/Ridgeville are considered part of Trinity Center. And so that's why they picked those 3 communities.
Okay.
So
I could go along with that. Then we could just put in a parentheses or whatever, there's the Trinity Center Community Service District.
Or when we get to agenda item 5, where we talk about community boundaries, we could define Trinity Center where the boundaries are then.
That's fine, because if that's the case, then it's like the D and C are the same thing.
Correct.
Right.
Yep. That's,
Okay.
yeah. All right, so we have a motion on the floor. So, let's see. How does that work? All those in favor say aye.
So if so
Let's see, I will make a substitute motion
Yeah, I think that's what you need.
to adopt option C with the understanding that Trinity Center is loosely defined as the Community Services District.
beautiful. I'll second that.
Okay. All those in favor of option of recommending to the Board of Supervisors that the community area plans be defined by option C, with the understanding that the Trinity Center area loosely includes the Community Services District. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Because I do want to give the consultant the flexibility to define it the way they normally define community boundaries. It doesn't have to be exactly the CSD, but just roughly the CSD. Okay. So then that closes agenda item 4, and we will move on to agenda item 5, general plan community boundaries. A request from the Board of Supervisors of the Planning Commission to determine and recommend to the board the boundaries of the 8 community plans within the General Plan 2050. Location countywide, presenter Minter Harnish. Back to you all.
Wonderful. So now that we have selected, or at least have a recommendation as to which communities will get a community or area plan, the next evolution of that is determining the boundaries of those communities. As has already been noted, that is a really important topic of this evening, and a really important topic for the community plan and area plan development. So going back to the survey that we had created, in which residents were asked to provide what they thought their community boundary was. We took that information, documented it, and then we looked at the census designated place boundaries. So this is kind of our logical methodology as we were going through this process. We wanted to take into consideration not only just the community feedback, but also the existing kind of federally approved boundaries that are out there. So we looked at this as a census designated place boundary, refer to it as CDP. And then we also looked at the CSDs and your fire protection districts. That was then compared to a review of the census blocks. So the census blocks is the smallest level of census information that you can, that the federal government puts out. So this is a kind of an important distinction of these boundaries moving forward, is that they were all rounded out by census block. So as you see them, hence why you'll see some that have some pretty interesting boundaries. But the reason why we did that again was because we can actually get usable demographic, population, economic results from the census that way. So we took all of those ideas, all of those metrics, and we overlapped them, and we came up with a way to determine these boundaries. And we implemented that for each boundary. So before I get into the various maps, I just want to preface kind of what you'll anticipate as we go through these next slides. There are a fair amount of slides to go through. But what this process will start with for the first community is it will be an aerial image of the community, followed by the base map, or kind of the base map we had created. And then what we'll show you is we will show you and guide you through all of the steps that we took to develop a boundary, starting with the CDP as our starting point, then overlaying that with the community feedback, then overlaying that with CSDs, fire protection districts, and then rounding that boundary out, looking at all of those, rounding it out based on census block. At the conclusion of that, we'll show you kind of what we think a good starting place for the boundary would be. We've identified those parcels that would be included, and we have some acreage totals that we can share with you. So when it was initially discussed prior to the meeting, I believe that we were going to go through each community one by one. Ed, if you'll be able to correct me on that, and receive feedback, or are we going to go through all of the communities and have a formal recommendation at the conclusion of my presentation?
No, Brent, I think it would be a lot easier to go through them one by one. And that way we're not trying to remember things from, an hour ago and decisions that were made long before. So let's just go through them one by one.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, then with that, we'll start with Douglas City. So I'll walk through what we're seeing on the map. So these pink lines are the census designated place boundary lines. So to the north, you can see that we have Weaverville. You can see how these boundary lines are they're weird. They follow not what we would anticipate the normal kind of parcel lines that we're used to. So the census designated place boundary is where we just started. From there, we overlaid all of the community responses for that particular community. And that's what this looked like. So all of the purple are individual responses. We changed the opacity on them, and we essentially created a heat map and a consensus as to what the community feels is their boundary. We then overlaid that with the existing community service district for Douglas City, and we found that for the most part, they follow really the same. A lot of the land is covered within each. And then this map might be hard to see, but in the background, there's small black lines, and those are the census blocks. And so we turned the census blocks on because we now needed to determine where to draw these lines. What lines are we going to be essentially following to determine these boundaries? And we determined that census block would be ideal for this exercise. And so through that process, overlaying all of these, we noticed that there was a portion that was left out of the census designated place boundary that the community members felt was very much a part of their community. So taking all of that feedback, this is what we had recommended for the community plan boundary for Douglas City. It is at its base the census designated place boundary, with the addition of a census block on the southeast of the community.
So Brent, what is the creek? I can't read that where you've extended the, to the southeast.
I will have to pull up another map. I can definitely get you that information in just a moment.
Indian Creek? Okay. Sorry.
So this was the recommended boundary, just based off of the CDP, and then incorporating this the south and the southerly eastern portion of the county. So here's all of the totals of the parcels. So it's difficult to see, but we turned on then all of the parcels to determine which parcels were going to be included. And all of the blue highlighted parcels kind of showed up within that boundary. So the idea that we're taking with these boundaries is, as you can see, there are some parcels that are barely within, and some of them are cut in half. There's our idea with these boundaries that any parcel that crosses over that boundary line would be included in that community plan or area plan for that particular boundary. There now comes the question, though, of the boundaries that will run into each other. And so we see that up at the top here with Weaverville and Douglas City and the Lewiston boundaries, of how there are properties that go between both. And that was still have to be a discussion, and with staff and with internally to determine how to determine the determination process for how those boundaries fall. But nevertheless, in the proposed boundary for Douglas City, total of 834 parcels, and ends up being total acreage of 35,143 kind of total acres that would essentially be guided through this community plan for Douglas City.
So the expansion beyond the CDP, the area expanded onto Indian Creek, how was that defined? How did you determine just a little narrow stretch along the creek, for example?
Right. So we looked at Google imagery and determined where residences were. The reason why it comes to a point is because we're following the census block. The reason why we're following the census block is because it gives us actual population data, usable statistics right away. And then from there, we looked at where the residences were. There are some residences that are along that road. When we looked at the community feedback, it also indicated that range, that area, felt very much a part of their community. And so listening to that, we incorporated that area into this boundary.
Okay, so then for Douglas City, do we have any public comment, or sorry, do we have any clarifying technical questions for the consultant? Do we have any public comment in the room or on Zoom?
Madam Chair,
Yeah.
I do have a question. So on the APNs on each parcel, will they be determined after these maps are set? Will they determine whether they're in the Weaverville or the Douglas City or the Lewiston one, so that the homeowner knows what's going, or the property owner knows what's going on? Or is it still, because it's a general plan overall coverage, something that is kind of matters but doesn't matter?
I would say the latter. I want to say it matters. These boundaries very much matter, but all that these boundaries are showing us is just a planning area. What are we looking at? What are we trying to develop? And so if that property, it will become a determination, but it doesn't implicate the property owner to do anything. It's just a way for us as your consultant team and county staff to have a general geographical idea of what this community is and what goals and policies are going to be specific to that.
And to just jump in here real quick and tag off of what Michael is saying is those parcels which do straddle the boundary line in this instance with Weaverville and Lewiston. After the determination and recommendation tonight from the Planning Commission to the board, and the board makes a recommendation, we'll be working at the direction of county staff to evaluate those fringe parcels to determine which plan they fall into. So when a homeowner is curious if their APN or if their parcel does fall within which one, they will know. Those parcels won't be in both communities. It'll be in one or the other. But that more specific or minute look at those fringe parcels is not part of the consideration tonight.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so do we need to have a motion on each community boundary as far as recommendations to the Board of Supervisors?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so does the commission wish to make a motion to adopt the proposed community boundaries for Douglas City as presented?
I'll make a motion to adopt them as presented.
Motion by Commissioner Barrett. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Commissioner Heaton. So Douglas City is defined as presented for the purposes of developing a community plan. Okay, we're going to move on to Hayfork, please.
Okay, so we'll start again with the aerial image just to give us an idea of where we are at. To the base map, then we will overlay the census designated place boundary lines. To the south, you can see Post Mountains, and Hayforks is directly center of the screen. We then turned on the individual survey responses from the online survey. And then we overlaid the fire protection district for the area. We then looked at the census blocks. And from our analysis, we thought that the existing census designated place boundary line was a fair boundary for Hayfork that not only took into consideration the fire protection district area, but also took into consideration feedback from the community. So if it's not broken, don't fix it. We decided that the Hayfork community plan boundary would mirror the census designated place boundary, and that is what you see here. When we turn on the parcels, you can see really the developed area of Hayfork. And now these would be all of the parcels in blue that would be included within this proposed boundary. And the statistics for that boundary are such: it would be over 1,600 parcels that would be considered in the plan, and over 63,000 acres of land, specifically 63,518 acres of land would be considered in the Hayfork community plan. And just to reiterate, our proposed and our recommended community plan boundary would follow that of the existing census designated place boundary. So I will turn it back over to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Do the commissioners have any questions? Do we have any public comment in the room or on Zoom for Hayfork?
No.
Okay. So would the commission recommend to the Board of Supervisors that they adopt the Hayfork Community Plan boundaries as presented? A motion?
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Commissioner Barrett,
I'll second.
second by Commissioner Ellis to adopt the Hayfork Community Plan boundaries as presented. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Did we vote on the last one? Okay, so all those in favor of Douglas City's community plan boundaries being recommended to the Board of Supervisors as presented?
Aye.
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 Commissioner Heaton is on it tonight. Okay, Heim Palm.
Okay, off to Heim Palm. And Heim Palm, while our community feedback in person during the November workshops last year was extremely successful, as Brenton had noted, it was one of the most heavily populated workshops. The online survey yielded one usable result, and that is what you see on the screen. As you can see, the community boundary that is proposed is much larger than the existing census designated place boundary, but we have it here for transparency to show you the feedback that we did receive. We then overlaid that with the Heim Palm CSD.
Is there a CSD?
CDP.
Oh, I see. The big blue square. Thank you. That's huge.
Very large, quite large. It's a very generous district. And so comparing all of the data, looking at community feedback, looking at the census designated place boundary in relationship to the CSD boundary, we again recommended that the census designated place boundary reflect the community boundary for Heim Palm. That said, here are the parcels, and then the parcels that would be included in this plan. And the statistics are over 1,000 parcels with unique APN numbers and 22,278 acres of land within the total boundary that would be covered by the plan.
Do we have any questions regarding Heim Palm boundaries? Any public comment in the room or on Zoom? Okay, bring it back for a motion. Do we have a motion to recommend to the Board of Supervisors that the community plan boundary be approved as presented?
I'll make a motion.
Commissioner Barrett, second by
I'll second it.
No.
Let's race.
second by Commissioner Ellis. Oh, Heaton.
Either, doesn't matter. Either way,
I didn't hear
Oh.
Ellis.
Okay,
I heard him speak up.
that's fine.
okay, second by Commissioner Heaton. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Junction City.
So some regional context. the census designated place boundary, then overlaid with the community responses from the online survey. Then we turned on the Junction City Fire Protection District, which is very large, goes off of the map. And the census designated place boundary and the community feedback provided are really covered by the Fire Protection District, at least as the boundary is today. We then looked at the census blocks of where we would draw this boundary, and again proposed that we would use the census designated place boundary as the community plan boundary for Junction City, feeling that it was responsive to community feedback, took into consideration health and safety for the Fire Protection District standpoint, and provided us really good demographic and usable statistics because it's part of a census designated place. So in this boundary, here are the parcels affected. And in total, there would be 623 parcels within the Junction City boundary. And that would comprise of 27,918 acres of land that would be considered within this community plan for Junction City.
So questions from the commissioners? So at a earlier planning commission meeting, we had a public comment where someone was wondering why Canyon Creek was not included. And so I see the parcels going up Canyon Creek, and I'm wondering why those weren't extended similar to what was done for Douglas City along Indian Creek.
There was no particular reason for not including those parcels. Again, this is just really a starting point and a recommendation for where we can draw these boundaries it's of course a very difficult process. So if there is a recommendation to expand into additional parcels, then we'll certainly do so. At least from our analysis and from the community responses that we had received, we had based our recommendation on the existing CSD boundary line, and that of course corresponded with the community feedback as stated.
Well, the existing fire district includes Canyon Creek. Am I reading that wrong?
It does include Canyon Creek. And it is at the purview of the planning commission if you would like the boundary of Junction City to move north to include Canyon Creek, it can. One way to do that, and this is just part of the overall methodology that we've been implementing, would be to any expansion beyond the CDP would be done at the census block level. So we would basically, if that was the direction provided to staff and the consultant team by the planning commission, we would basically expand the census blocks north. Those would still fall within the fire protection district, and they would cover Canyon Creek going north. So you would have it would be a more oblong boundary, but nonetheless, that is still applicable and doable as part of this.
Well, okay, that was my question. Any public comments in the room?
John Brower from Junction City. I agree. You should probably extend it all the way to the top of Canyon Creek. And map is hard to read. Maybe you could show something with the roads, but lots of people figured Junction City could conceivably stretch all the way to like up Soldier Creek and Dutch Creek, like the back road to Hayfork, all the way to the top of the summit where Soldier Creek meets Big Creek. Those Forest Service roads. Like that whole side of the watershed.
It does go pretty far south.
I can't really tell on these images. Maybe
Here's Soldier Creek. Can you go to the next map? So here's Soldier Creek. It doesn't include Dutch Creek.
Yeah, so it may make sense to drag it all the way to, like Big
Parcels
Creek
down there?
side.
Are there parcels down there? Oh, yeah, there are a bunch of parcels. If you look at page 78, the parcels on Dutch Creek aren't included.
Michael, do you mind going back to the census blocks too to see the census block expansion if it did move south to Dutch Creek?
Yeah, see, these parcels here. Is that what you're talking about, John?
Yeah, and then even further, there's a few small ones on the back way to Hayfork. Like, see where the legend is on this image, that whole white box? Yeah, that might be parcels I'm thinking of. There's some private property off of the Forest Service Road that connects back road between Junction City and Hayfork. And the Junction City is kind of considered all the way to the top of that summit where Soldier Creek goes over is on the Junction City side and Big Creek is on the Hayfork side. There's a bit of private property out there.
Well, it makes sense to me to include the census, the parcels, the census block level parcels on Canyon Creek and the census block level parcels along Dutch Creek. But I'm not sure about going further towards Hayfork. You know, what do you think, Dawn?
I think Canyon Creek makes sense. The other stuff, I'm not really sure. It lays outside just like where it stops on the west end, Helena. It stops at Helena, but just 6 more miles, then it's Big Flat. And we could, argue to push it that way because of fire protection or whatever. But the general plan covers everything else. And I know that the further out I live, the more I want to be able to decide what I'm doing. And so maybe I'm wrong on those people out there, but maybe not. Yeah. I think they're still considered part of Junction City regardless of what the boundary is going to be anyway. Just like we consider ourselves part of Junction City, even though we're not.
Okay, so any consensus from the commission? Do we want to include, so Canyon Creek has spoken at the planning commission meetings asking to be included. So any response as far as whether or not we should include Canyon Creek?
I'm fine with that.
I think we should include Canyon Creek and Soldier Creek. and
Okay.
Dutch Creek.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, the general consensus is to include the census block level parcels on Canyon Creek and Dutch Creek. So the very northern extent and then extended to the southeast corner. Is that correct? What I'm hearing.
Might look more south instead of southeast, but I don't.
South, okay. But Dutch Creek,
Sounds good.
okay. So if I understand correctly, I'm looking for a motion from the Planning Commission to recommend to the Board of Supervisors that the Junction City community proposed boundaries be adopted with the amendments to include the Canyon Creek and Dutch Creek census block level parcels.
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Commissioner Ellis, second by
I'll second that.
Commissioner Heaton. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we will move on to Lewiston.
Okay, so here's our regional context map for Lewiston. And here is a census designated place boundary for Lewiston. As we can see, it runs west and borders the and borders the other additional CDPs. So we have to again look at the relationship of those boundaries, so that would still be determined. But here was the community responses, and we thought it was very clear that the CDP covered a majority of what the community felt was their community. However, there was this large portion up to the north that isn't really included in this census designated place boundary. We then overlaid the Lewiston CSD and turned on census block data. And comparing really all of the results, I determined that there was a portion to the north that we felt could be included within the Lewiston boundary. And so it would essentially be a kind of the expansion of what we would now call the census designated place boundary. We would be expanding it north. Recreation opportunities, the connection to the lake were prominent comments throughout our engagement. So having control north and being able to guide development in that area, we felt that this, including this area, really achieved that. So here would be the proposed boundary. Again, it would be a modification, if you will, of the census designated place boundary. The area in blue is kind of the area that we've identified as being beneficial to include. Here is what the proposed boundary looks like. Here are the parcels within this boundary. And then parcels affected by the boundary. In total then, within the proposed boundary, it was 985 total parcels and 23,526 total acres of land within the proposed Lewiston community plan boundary.
So do we have any questions? I have a question. So the north boundary that runs along Lewiston Lake, is that the highway? Is that Trinity Dam Boulevard? And so what I'm getting at there is the Pine Cove Marina, that community expressed a desire to be included in the community plan, and they are on the north side of the highway. Are they included in the community plan boundary?
We'll have to check. If you give me a moment, I can confirm whether or not they are included.
Yeah, if the boundary runs along the Trinity Dam Boulevard, then they would not be included.
So as of right now, the Pine Cove Marina area, that is actually just north of that red community plan boundary where you start to see the bend in the Lewiston Lake area. So if we were to include them, we would need to take the census block data and move further north and extend the boundary beyond what is being proposed in front of you.
Okay. Yeah, from Lewiston community residents, I think they'll be very happy to see that it goes from Highway 299's north to be included now in the community plan. But I would like to figure out a way to include that community that's, you know, a lot, part of the Pine Cove Marina. So would that be by adding census block level parcels again?
It would. Michael, do you mind turning on the census block data? Yeah. So essentially, when you're looking at the waterway as it curves its way north toward Trinity Lake, we would encompass census blocks that border that. And that would encompass the areas, Chair, that you're discussing.
I think it's just this one, right? I think it's just that one straight north. Go to the left.
We would need to zoom in a little further when selecting them, but if it was the commission's recommendation to include those areas, including Pine Cove Marina, we could, and we would make sure that they're encompassed within the census block. And then that would eventually extend the community plan boundary north.
It's looking like it's just that one small census block. What do you guys think? Okay. Yeah, but I mean right here.
But on your map, it'd be right here. That's right.
Large census block to the north.
It's not that far up the lake.
It's like Pine Cove, right? So that like Bend, it's like right above it.
Right. So
It would be that larger.
the larger one, or is it just that small one straight up there? That small one?
The right.
Yeah,
No, it doesn't include it on that.
that's not on there.
I can show you a
But it's
Google
south
map
of
on
the
my
dam.
phone.
Oh, damn. Like, right there.
GIS with me. I can show you this if this helps at all. Trying to make sure certain areas included. If I had the roads in there, it'd be easier to tell.
Oh, you're right, it's further north.
Right on the lake.
Okay. You're right. Okay. Thank you. That was my technical question. We're going to move on now to public comment in the room regarding the Lewiston boundaries. Public comment on Zoom? No. Okay. So is there a way to incorporate the Pine Cove Marina, that Lakewood Terrace, without that huge census block?
So we would have to modify kind of the methodology for this community if that was the intent. That would entail looking at the parcel data that we have today and trying to determine, after looking at the census block, what's the population. We will then try to estimate then where that population actually is. So looking at the parcel layer, at the parcel level, sorry. And then from there, we could essentially snip, cut, round off a census block. Now, the demographic, the only downside to doing so is that the accuracy of the federal kind of census data would no longer be preserved, because we now know we don't have a finite enough view of where individuals are living in that particular census block. But through an effort, we could still determine population and kind of through the process I had described.
Okay. So what would be the consensus of the commission? Would we like to see the Lewiston community include the Pine Cove Marina, Lakewood Terrace communities since they've expressed a desire to be included in the community plan?
Yes. Include them.
Okay. So,
Second that.
so we have a motion to include, to adopt, we have a motion to recommend to the Board of Supervisors that we adopt the proposed Lewiston community boundaries with the inclusion of the Pine Cove Marina, Lakewood Terrace community with minimal expansion into the census block level parcel. I think I'm saying that right. I mean, I'm hoping that the consultants can expand the boundary to capture that community without capturing a lot of land, you know, that's federal land that people aren't going to be living on anyway.
Chair, I will definitely work with the consultants to make sure, because I definitely agree that those two need to be included in Lewiston for sure.
Okay. So all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay.
A motion from
Oh, sorry.
Barrett and Heaton.
Yep.
Correct.
Just
All right. Post Mountain.
Okay, so regional context map as a start. There's the census designated place boundary. Then overlaid with community mapping responses. Then turning on the census blocks. And rounding out areas based on community feedback and kind of what was envisioned for this area in that survey. And so here is kind of the result of the proposed boundary. So it kind of is a modification essentially of the census designated place boundary. It runs to the north to capture some residences up to the north that aren't currently included in that CDP. It then runs south along State Highway 36 as an ability for this community to potentially have commercial or whatever uses besides residential along a commercial or a mobility corridor. So we expanded the boundary beyond kind of over State Highway 36. And then that runs all the way east to State Highway 3 at the split. So here is a look at what it would look like if we were to kind of essentially modify the census designated place boundary. It's a much larger area than what the census designated place boundary currently contains. These would be the parcels that are currently, or that would be affected and considered as part of the Post Mountain Community Plan. And here again, these would be the specific parcels in blue. In total, the plan would encompass over 1,000 parcels and over 22,000 acres of land. And again, it was really developed based on community feedback and the desire to help guide a community that currently does not have a plan, but is very much a part of the community and guiding the development was something for that community, was something that was not only expressed by the individuals, it was expressed by the board as well when we had initially presented these to them.
So on page 98, where you have the expansion beyond the CDP, that light blue, how do you define those? Is there a census designated place, a little line that you're following there?
Yeah, so here on this map, and it's hard to see on the PowerPoint presentation, in the included maps, hopefully in your packet, it might be a little bit easier, but here is the map where you see the census blocks. And so what we did is we just followed those blocks as we expanded the boundary, again, to hopefully preserve census level data. And so that is how we based our proposed boundary, again, following those census block lines. And I think it's important to note that the census block lines it is the smallest line level data that is put out. But the way that they develop census blocks is quite interesting. They just don't look at aerial footage or aerial view. They actually take into consideration geography, topo lines, roadways, existing community boundaries. And so it is really a good starting point for this effort when we're looking at defining this area. So this would be, with the blue, I think I'll leave it on here, this would be the proposed boundary for Post Mountain.
And I'm just curious, how does the Post Mountain PUD fit in there? Right, aren't they reactivating themselves? Ed?
You know, I don't know. I can't speak to it. I don't know. I know that at one point when I was in OES, they were definitely making an effort to, but I don't know if they got any information for these maps from that.
Because there was a thing in the paper yesterday about, they reactivated their board, right? The PUD, Post Mountain PUD.
Sorry, I didn't read the paper, ma'am.
Okay. Well, I was just curious how the PUD boundaries fit there, but okay. So does anybody else have any clarifying technical questions regarding Post Mountain? Okay, any public comment in the room or on Zoom? Okay, so what is the commission's pleasure regarding Post Mountain? To recommend to the Board of Supervisors that it be adopted as presented?
Yes, I'll make a motion.
So a motion by Commissioner Barrett, second by Commissioner
Me.
Heaton. Thank you. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Weaverville.
We all know what to expect now. Here's our reference map. Here's our base map for Weaverville. Started with the census designated place boundary lines. You can see the relationship between those boundary lines of Douglas City and Junction City and Lewiston. Overlaid that with the community responses received online. And then overlaid those responses with the Weaverville CSD and the Weaverville Fire Protection District. We then turned on the census blocks. Those are those thin lines, faint lines in the back, and used those to encompass the areas that we felt and the community felt should be included in this boundary line. So it expands upon the census designated place boundary to both the east and the west and slightly north. Here is another view of which areas be included beyond the census designated place boundary. And here's what the proposed boundary would look like in relationship to the other proposed boundaries. Here would be the parcels included in this boundary, and then the parcels that would be affected. Again, we have still the discussion that we'll have internally with staff as to how we then go about determining the other parcels that are kind of crossing these community plans. In total, the Weaverville Community Plan would have over 2,200 parcels within its boundary limits, and that would equate to 27,566 acres of land. And I will show that process of where we had expanded it based on the community feedback and the fire protection district. This provides a interesting perspective of how it was rounded out. And this would be the proposed boundary for Weaverville.
Thank you. Do we have any questions?
No.
Okay, any public comment? No? Okay, so do we wish to recommend to the Board of Supervisors that they adopt the community plan boundary for Weaverville as presented?
Yes.
Is it?
By Commissioner
I'll
Barrett,
second it.
second by Commissioner Ellis. All those in favor? Say
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. All right, Trinity Center.
Okay, we saved Trinity Center as the last slide here. I believe this will be a robust conversation. So based on the initial direction from the board, that was of a total of 8 specific community plans. Trinity Center was identified as one of those particular communities. And at the time, before the recommendation for option,
C.
Option C, it was just Trinity Center. Now, we had proposed an alternative that was a larger geographical area that went down to Covington Mill and Minersville. But for this slide, I would say this is specific to Trinity Center when the recommendation was have it to be just that community, specific to Trinity Center. So I will show kind of the methodology proposed for this boundary. Census designated place boundary for Trinity Center and for Coffee Creek to the north. Then overlaid with responses from Trinity Center. So very large area that the community considers part of their community. We then overlaid that with the community service district for the Trinity Center area. We then turned on the census blocks, and from there rounded out our proposed boundary for the Trinity Center area. It runs along Highway 3 to the north towards Coffee Creek, and to the south, but not incorporating either Covington Mill or Minersville, being that the initial direction was for a Trinity Center specific community plan. So when we expand these areas beyond the census designated place boundary, this was the initial starting point, proposed boundary for Trinity Center. Here are the parcels in the area. And then in blue would be the parcels affected or included in this plan. And that really totals up to over 520 acres and 529 parcels, my apologies, and 16,642 acres would be planned within the proposed Trinity Community Plan.
And I just do want to jump in here real quick and just to reiterate what Michael was saying here. The boundary proposed here is reflective of option C, is where the board was heading. So this only includes Trinity Center with some minor expansions beyond the CDP. I know that tonight the commission, as part of their as part of your recommendation to the board, was to look to still call it Trinity Center, but to look beyond Trinity Center, mainly at the CSD boundaries that are in place now, because those CSD boundaries extend further west, they extend east and south. So as part of this discussion, before we get into hand it back to you, Chair, I would like Michael to go through the next set of slides, which were originally called the North Lake area, because since we brought forward option D, which included Trinity Center, South, Ridgeville, Covington Mill, Minersville, we created a map that showed what that would look like, just in case the commission chose option D over option C. So Michael, do you mind going through that? I think that might help further the discussion with the commission.
Absolutely. So I'll let you stare at this slide for just a little bit longer. Take your mental snapshot. And we'll move on to what was another option. Option D would be the North Lake Area Plan. Census designated place boundary for Trinity Center. The community responses for Trinity Center overlaid with the community responses from Covington Mill. So Covington Mill, at least the community responses show that it is really extending south as opposed to heading up Highway 3 towards Trinity Center, but that the Trinity Center responses very much included Minersville and Covington Mill in their feedback. We then overlaid the Trinity Center CSD, turned on the census blocks to round everything out, and proposed this boundary. The census blocks in the Trinity Center area are rather large. And I think that's why you're seeing such a large area as part of this plan. Now, initially, that wasn't necessarily a problem for us because it was an area plan, right? So it was supposed to be a larger area, just beyond what Trinity Center was, just beyond what the census does, or beyond what the CSD. So this is the outcome of that methodology. And this would be the proposed North Lake area boundary. Those areas in blue I'm showing here, those are different than that's different than the boundary that is being proposed in option C. So you can kind of see where the blue adds on to that. Here would be the final boundary. Here are the parcels, and then the parcels affected. And in comparison, this area encompasses over 1,000 parcels and 60,588 acres of land within this. Was proposed to be a North Lake area plan.
And I think what's important to note about this one is this one does reflect community feedback for those communities of Minersville, Covington Mill, Ridgeville, south of Trinity Center along 3 that feel like they are part of Trinity Center at its core. But what's in front of you right now, Commission, also includes the CSD. So the expanded community plan boundary includes the full CSD, and it goes beyond the CSD because we're measuring this by census block. So what we did as part of this made sure that the census blocks encompass the full CSD, included not only Trinity Center to the north, but everything down 3 from those other communities who provided feedback that they feel like they are part of Trinity Center. So this is kind of this option D, which still could be option C, based on the direction of the commission tonight. This doesn't have to be called the North Lake area. It could just be called the Trinity Center Community Plan that encompasses the Trinity Center CSD. So just keep that in mind through your discussion. I don't want to get hung up on the actual name of it. I think in this instance, if the commission wished to cover this entire area within the CSD, it's completely doable with what's before you.
Okay, do we have any questions? I have a lot of discussion, but let's go ahead and get public comment in the room or on Zoom. Okay, so
Pat? Pat, you want to go ahead?
So Pat Frost, the chairman of the Trinity Center Community Services District. The commissioners have a letter that the CSD board sent to you. I think it actually shows up in your agenda under agenda item 4. And so I'm mostly here just to answer questions based on that letter, which pretty much defines why we think the CSD boundary is the most logical boundary. In some senses, I kind of feel like the consultants doing the best they can at this point are pounding a square peg into a round hole.
okay, thank you. So that closes public comment. I will bring it back to the commission. I would like to at least consider a motion where the Trinity Center, let me just make a motion for discussion. I'd like to move that the commission recommend to the Board of Supervisors that the Trinity Center Community Plan boundaries roughly approximate the Trinity Center Community Services District boundary. And would anyone care to second that for discussion? Thank you. So I was a little concerned when I read this. All the other community plans pretty much incorporated all of their CSD or fire district into the community plan, unless the fire district was something huge like Junction City. So for some reason, the Trinity Center plan was the only one where the CSD was just cut in half. The proposal for Trinity Center would be for 529 parcels, 16,642 acres. If you use the CSD boundary, it moves it up to 800 parcels and 18,517 acres, which is consistent with the sizes of the other community plans. You know, they range from Hyam Palm, 22,000 acres, Junction City, 27,000 acres, Lewiston, 23,000 acres, Post Mountain, 22,000 acres. So to me, size-wise, it seems like the CSD is right in line with the other community plans. The North Lake proposed map That's huge, that 60,000 acres. And it includes big chunks of the National Recreation Area, all the stuff along the lake. And it's going up into the Trinity Alps Wilderness. Like the consultant said, the census designated place map, the CDPs for that area are just huge. I did the census there. I know they're huge. I got assigned to go out and talk to find people. So to me, that 60,000 acre map just seems like overkill. And so I'm just trying to figure out if there's a way to more narrowly define the community plans so that it's not this huge map, but that it does pick up the communities like Covington Mill and Ridgeville that consider themselves part of Trinity Center because they're part of the CSD. We're all the same fire department. We're all the same school district. We have the same land use issues where between Covington Mill and Trinity Center, SPI is taking parcels out of TPZ for future development. So we're going to have to deal with land use issues. That's all that stretch of Highway 3. And so it doesn't make sense to me to have just the Trinity Center community plan that ignores the communities to the south of them that have the same issues. So you kind of cut the CSD in half. And it doesn't make sense either to have some huge area that includes a ton of Forest Service land that's never going to really, the community plan isn't going to have much influence over that.
Well, I think there's, Chair, if you don't mind, I think there could be a common solution here. Similar to how Michael had mentioned in some of the other communities where we had to cut some of the census blocks, realizing that when you pull demographic data, yes, it's going to cover the full census block, but maybe that census block goes out for miles and miles and miles and miles beyond where actual development is occurring or will ever occur, that we just snip those back just for the boundary discussion. I think that can be done here as well. So when you're looking at Highway 33 and you're looking eastward toward the lake, we don't have to capture all of those census blocks that extend way outside the CSD. I think we can trim them back. That definitely can be done. When pulling demographic data, we will count the full census block when we're trying to get quantifiable information. But for the boundary discussion, we can definitely clip it back so it's more aligned with the CSD and doesn't go beyond it so much that it seems a bit aggressive.
Well, I think that's what I'm suggesting when I'm trying to make a motion that the community plan boundaries approximate the CSD boundaries, in a way that however makes sense to you, but that it not be 60,000 acres versus less than 20,000 acres.
Well, I think if there was a motion made, and I'll default to county planning staff here. If there's a motion made, we can work with county staff. Ed, does that seem to work?
Can you hear me, Brent?
Yes.
Yes, of course. And this, like you had said already a couple times, this is a starting point. This is a recommendation to the board. So I think it should be as accurate as possible. So I just definitely agree with Carol.
Okay, thank you. That helps. So my motion is to approve the Trinity Center community plan boundaries approximating the community service district boundary. And I will say by working with staff and incorporating the appropriate census block data. Does that work?
I have a question for you on that.
Yeah.
Is the North Lake area one what you're really talking about? Because the Trinity Center to the North Lake is the one that includes, this is what you're talking about, correct?
Right. Yeah, this is what
So
we're
the name
talking
of it's
about.
North Lake, not Trinity Center.
Well,
In
But,
this, I'm just
um,
trying to get clarification for how we're gonna make a motion.
normally the North Lake area plan would have included the Coffee Creek area, which, Coffee Creek and Trinity Center kind of consider themselves distinct communities. So, so we're just, because the Trinity Center Community Services District, to the locals, that defines Trinity Center.
Okay.
So,
But
And as a point of
in the
clarification,
paperwork, it says
the
North Lake.
North Lake area proposed boundary does not include the
correct.
community of Coffee Creek. It's just containing Trinity
Right.
Center and the southern
But-
community.
But in terms of trying to eliminate confusion, normally if you say North Lake area, people think Coffee Creek. So your North
Understood.
Lake community or North Lake area boundary does not include Coffee Creek. So that would be confusing people.
And that's why I had mentioned in the beginning when we started talking about the Highway 3 corridor that we can always change the terminology. So the commission tonight actually moved forward with calling it Trinity Center, which was part of that option C. So as part of this, if the motion was to use the boundaries based off the North Lake map that's in front of you, we would use that North Lake map concept that includes Trinity Center, Ridgeville, Covington Mill, Minersville with the CSD boundary. But we would call it Trinity Center because the commission has already voted with option C. So the name of this area would need to align with C, which is just Trinity Center, not North Lake.
Thank you
To
for
me, it's-
clarification, because that was why I was asking that.
To me, it's the same as, so Junction City goes all the way to Helena, that community plan. So Junction City to Helena, what's the difference between Trinity Center to Covington Mill?
No, I was just asking because the map that you were describing says North Lake area in the presentation. That's why I was asking for clarification. That's all.
Okay. Yeah,
I understand now.
I don't know which map you want to use, but I think it would be the community plan is for Trinity Center. Mill and Minersville consider themselves part of Trinity Center. They're part of the CSD, they're part of the fire department, they're part of the Trinity Center School District, you name it. And then how you do the details on the map. If it's roughly the CSD, then that to me is option C, a community plan for Trinity Center.
Sounds good. I second that.
Okay,
We need a vote.
so all in favor say aye. Okay, so Brent, do you have anything else for us?
I do not believe there is anything else. We have achieved what we were looking for tonight, and I really appreciate the commission for stepping up to do this. I know it's a lot of work. It's been a long meeting, but I think we have everything now formalized as recommendations to the board. So the next steps as part of this process is now going to the Board of Supervisors with the recommended vision with the modifications as determined, the recommended communities as part of option C, and then the boundaries that were voted on tonight, including all the modifications, Canyon Creek and Junction City, Lewiston and the Pine Cove Marina, and then also looking at the Trinity Center area and focusing more on the CSD boundaries. So we're finding those boundaries and including everything south on the Highway 3 corridor. So we will bring that to the board. The board will make a determination from there, and then the community plan writing process, where we actually develop all the unique goals and policies for each of these areas, begins.
Okay, so I think we will take a short break before we move on to agenda item 6. That closes agenda item 5.
Just because I agree with the map. Well, they just, they call it north, but they also specify that that was their plan, Trinity Center, so I understood. But I just thought if you're saying Trinity Center,
given how recently this ordinance has been adopted. So with all of this, and regarding the environmental review, this would fall under the common sense exemption of CEQA.
Excuse me, Chair. I'd like to start this item over. I forgot to hit the mute button, and so they have not heard most of Mitchell's presentation.
Oh. That is true.
Sorry, Mitchell.
It's all good, all good.
You're doing a great job.
Thank you.
That
All
was
right.
good practice.
Thank you. Okay, so to start.
Long night.
It really has. So this project would amend Trinity County Municipal Code Section 15.25.030, and it would alter the section to drop the minimum parcel requirement from 5 acres to 2.5 acres in the case that there is no municipal water or sewer connection to said parcel. Currently, the section qualifies the size requirement as limited density rural dwellings are only allowed in the following zones for parcels 5 acres or larger. As mentioned before, these zones would be unclassified, agricultural preserve, rural residential, agricultural forest, agricultural, and timber production zone. If approved by the Board of Supervisors, the statement would be amended to read as such. Limited density rural dwellings are only allowed in the following zones: unclassified agricultural preserve district, rural residential, agricultural forest, agricultural, and timber production zone. If for parcels that would have a municipal sewer and water connection, this minimum acreage would be 5. Whereas for parcels without either of those, or with only one of those and not the other, that minimum would be dropped to 2.5. On April 28th of 2022, the Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend the limited density ordinance to the Board of Supervisors with the following recommendations. Under the enforcement agency section, it mentioned to add that they will provide a list of agencies that the individual will need to contact to receive the permit. Under owner built, to add that it can apply as owner built once every 2 years. Under rural, a point of clarity was made that it would be a minimum of 2.5 acres. That was decided by the commission. And to add that unless rebuilding after a disaster or bringing an existing building into compliance that was in place prior to drafting this ordinance, it will include aggregate parcels that to count towards 2.5 acres and will exclude the minimum parcel size with director's exemption upon confirmation that the property complies with the spirit of rural housing. The permit validity section mentions that permits shall be valid as long as the owner builder continues to show active progress and the work is being completed in good faith. Under the inspections, requests, and notice section, it is to add that the enforcement agency will instruct the owner builder to who they have to contact for inspection and when. And then there was the mention of including timberland preserves as well as the at least 2.5 acre minimum, engineering requirements for the roof, and the definition of gray water being adopted from the act that Humboldt County uses. A section for liability was added that stated that the county is not to be held liable for issues within the owner-built dwelling overall. On August 16th, 2022, the Trinity County Board of Supervisors had this item set forth with the 4 following questions effectively set forth, which were if the zones presented were the proper zones. However, in this instance, the timber production zone was not included. And then another question was what size should the parcel or minimum be for this kind of zone or for this kind of ordinance? Should it be 2.5 acres or 5 acres? And then was a question about should permits be valid without renewal for a maximum period of 3 years, or should it be longer or shorter? Should temporary occupancy prior to the completion of the entire structure be allowed? For these questions, the following determinations were made. One of them was that every zoning type will be included along with the timber production zone, that the minimum acreage required shall be 5 acres overall, that the existing structures eligible shall only be eligible for a period of 3 years, no longer overall, and that the use and occupancy of portions of the dwelling or prior to completion of the entire structure shall be allowed except for farm labor housing. With these specifics included, the Board of Supervisors unanimously voted to approve this ordinance. However, in retrospect, there is one community that may have been overlooked unintentionally, which would be Post Mountain. Because of the small parcel size in their instance, they would not be able to apply for unlimited density rural dwellings without going through the process ministerially or through the planning commission in order to get either the approval from the director or the commission regarding their status overall. And as a result of this, there could be potential issues down the road. So in order to ensure whether or not this standard we hold was accurate for the type of ordinance that this is, we looked at multiple different counties to account for whether or not this was a standard practice. Of these counties, we found that two of them matched, or one of them matched our standard. One of them was above our standard. Two were at 1 acre, and the plurality of them had a variation of no minimum requirement, so long as there would be enough space to meet the setbacks for the septic and water systems. The findings from this were that our practice overall is relatively unique in that we are holding a standard of acreage minimums a bit above what other similar counties have held, and that having a different minimum overall, given that it's been an established practice in other counties, would enable for more people who need to apply, specifically in areas like Post Mountain, which may have issues with their buildings overall or be at risk of wildfires given their relatively forested, high elevation location. And the difference in permits that this would make would be relatively minimal at this time, given that there are only 5 permits, with 4 having been approved automatically given their acreage, and one of them being in the place of requiring a variance due to its lower acreage size. However, given the recent nature of this ordinance being passed within a year, or slightly over a year, pardon me, this could potentially mean that we could see clog up down the road in the planning department. And if the staffing issues are not resolved by then, this could lead to a delay of important work, potentially. And that is where the benefit of this would overall come in. Regarding the environmental review, this would qualify as a general rule exemption as section 15060 C2, mentioning that activities will not result in a direct or reasonably foreseeable indirect physical change in the environment. And for that reason, planning staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt resolution PC 2023-12, recommending that the Board of Supervisors find the amendment to Chapter 15.25.030 of Trinity Code exempt from the provisions of California Environmental Quality Act pursuant to Public Resources Code 1560, and that the Board of Supervisors approve an ordinance to amend the zoning code of the County of Trinity as identified in resolution number 2023-12. Alternatives. The Planning Commission may request a continuance for additional information. The Planning Commission may recommend an alternative request for modifications to be made to the Board of Supervisors, such as removing the minimum acreage requirement entirely, and the Planning Commission may deny the requested modifications, all of these alternatives having no financial implications. Thank you.
Thank you. Good job. But don't go away. I have. So do the commissioners have questions for Mitchell?
I have a couple of questions. One is the 5-acre minimum was set based on what? And if the 2.5 acre minimum is installed, how does that affect fire protection, tax base, stuff like that? Is it going to be a benefit to the county to be able to have more structures built because of that, or is it going to be a hardship?
Okay, I'll admit I'm looking through the haze a bit right now, given how late this is, but I'll address that, of course. So the first question, it was regarding why it was set at 5 acres. That was a decision made by the Board of Supervisors. Offhand, I cannot remember the specific reason, but I do know that there is a bit of questioning of that at the moment.
Well, they asked the Planning Commission whether or not our recommendation would be 2.5 acres or 5, and we chose 5.
I thought we
No,
chose
you
2.5.
chose 2.5.
We chose 2.5.
No, we chose 5.
No, I believe we chose 2.5.
We chose 5, and they chose 5.
According to the documentation, it was shown a bit differently at 2.5. Was there a,
Minutes section, right here, near the bottom of the page, says for clarity,
Yeah.
a minimum of 2.5 was the choice for the commission.
Page 1 of 2.
Yeah, okay.
And the board moved it to the higher amount.
Oh, you're right. The board moved it to the higher amount for the fire department concerns. Correct.
So that was the concern.
Yeah.
Was fire.
So other questions?
oh wait, there was another one that Mr. or
I think,
Supervisor.
Obviously, it would make it so that there would be more structures, which would probably increase tax base, which would maybe offset some of those things too. I don't know.
well,
I don't know that I have a real question there.
That is fair.
okay, so thank you for, I sent Mitchell some questions ahead of time and asked him to include these in his report, and I appreciate you doing that. So one of the questions I asked is what were the minimum parcel acreages for some of these adjacent counties? And so he did answer that, but it's a little bit simple. Like for Shasta County, there aren't any size requirements in terms of acreage, but you can only use the owner-built limited density houses if you are in where the Carr and Zog fires are. So it's not countywide, it's very geographically limited. So those are, if you're rebuilding in a fire area, yeah, there's no acreage limit, but it's not a countywide ordinance. And so something like Butte County, the minimum parcel acreage is 1 acre, but they have retained the requirement to comply with Chapter 1A, the building construction materials requirements for wildfire protection. We don't have that. So it is a little bit, our acres maybe not, might be smaller, but their requirements are more stringent. So it's a little bit of a toss-up. So one of my questions, we had a lot of discussion about how to help the Post Mountain folks, because I get that. We put a language in there where Post Mountain had, anybody has 3 years to take advantage of this ordinance to bring their house up to that code. If it's like not up to code now, they could come up to this minimum code. Do you know how many people from Post Mountain have taken advantage of that? Or are the people down there that want to build a house, are they all talking brand new houses, not bringing an existing house up to code?
People from Post Mountain, I haven't heard anything specifically from that community, and I haven't received anything specifically so far overall.
Okay, I'm just trying to figure out what the problem is that we're trying to solve here.
One major issue would be that given this general plan amendment process coming forward, and and at the supervisors meeting, the increasing involvement of people from Post Mountain, there definitely is a strong potential that as this plan goes forward, that there would be more people interested in other portions of county code, such as this limited density rural dwelling housing ordinance. And a result of that could potentially be a large number of people realizing that they need to go through a process a bit more specific and a bit more ministerial than other parts of the county may need to, and that could lead to potential issues there.
Well, I have a question about that. So, variances, they're limited to specific things that you can consider. Okay, you can't have a special privilege. So you can't have one guy saying, I want mine because I only have a 2-acre lot, and another guy's, next to him saying, well, I want the same thing, and the next thing you know, you've totally destroyed the minimum acreage requirement because everybody's saying, I need this variance. And so it has to be a really special reason. It can't be that special privilege. It has to be based on the size, the topography, all those criteria. And so if you have a bunch of people coming into the building department saying, I want a variance, what's the authority to actually issue a variance if the only reason they're asking for a variance is they want to have a smaller lot and all their neighbors want the same thing? How do you do that? Isn't it pretty much you just have to deny them all? So why does it an extra burden on the building department?
In that, in one of the cases mentioned, showed that having gone through a disaster would be a way to get through this. And in the case that normally speaking,
But those are an exemption. Those aren't a variance.
that is true, but the exemption would be required that there would be something set by the planning commission regarding urgency ordinances, and that the fire effectively damaged the area to a large extent, which may effectively lead to a situation where people are waiting for a while afterwards, given the amount of time that it can take from a fire's destruction to the passing of an urgency ordinance. And
I don't think that's the way it's written. It says a natural disaster. They can seek an exemption due to a natural disaster. It doesn't require an urgency ordinance declaration or anything. I mean, if their house burns down in a wildland fire, they can take advantage of this ordinance and rebuild without the stricter new building standards. But if someone from Post Mountain wants to just argue, I just don't have enough property, so I have to get a variance. A variance is, Bella goes through issuing variances all the time, the criteria, and there can't be a special privilege, there's that criteria. It can't be a different use. So maybe you can answer that better.
My first thought is that I would be worried that may fall under a use variance situation, and that's not allowed, because if you wouldn't be allowed to have the use, you wouldn't be allowed to have the use. But a zoning or a parcel size could be determined. I'm a little confused with this one myself. Because a variance is used to create exceptions for performance standards in zoning code. And having a certain parcel size for the criteria to qualify for a use, I don't know if that would be a performance standard.
Yeah, and how is one parcel different than the next one, that he's going to get a special privilege if the only difference is, they own the same acreage, just one guy applied for a variance and the other guy didn't or something.
Usually you just wouldn't be able to apply.
Right, that's what I'm thinking, that these
Yeah.
guys really don't qualify for a variance. So and my point there is if they really don't qualify, then I don't see that there's a huge workload for the planning department, because you're not going to be reviewing a bunch of these for variances. So that part of the staff report just I was like, how does that work?
I may have misspoke on that part, and my apologies for that. I aim to have high standards regarding that. It does bring up an issue, though, regarding the community viewing itself as being effectively not treated the same as other communities within the county. And because they are so small, they have such small acres, it could create an issue in the long run, similar to what we saw with the general plan, where they were almost left out of the community plan and a large number of people came in. So that would be another potential issue that could come about by not passing this, which would be a community feeling they are being left out of the process and effectively harming our credibility effectively.
Well, that's, I
But
don't know about
the
the land
lots-
use decision.
But lot size isn't based on community. You're not pointing a specific at a community and saying, no, you don't get it because your lots are too small. It's the size of the lot is the determination whether they can do that kind of housing. Is that correct?
Because the
So
other,
it doesn't matter if your lot's 2.4 and it's 2.5, or if it's 5 and you're anything under it, sorry, you don't get to. I mean, that's kind of how it works, and it's supposed to work that way, right?
here's my concern about Post Mountain. So you're saying you're going to lower the acreage to 2.5 acres if they don't have water and sewer. So that means you're going to have more wells and septic tanks, a higher density of those than you have other areas where if you have water and sewer there, it's 5 acres, but you've got water and sewer. To me, that's kind of a little bit backwards that you're saying where you don't have those municipal services, you guys get to have buildings that don't have the same building standard, plus you get to have wells and septic tanks closer together. So that's one concern. But my main concern, and I think this is what the Board of Supervisors reflected, was that the ordinance doesn't require compliance with Chapter 7A, so you don't have to have the home hardening, the building construction, standards that everybody else has to build a new house nowadays.
You're talking about like sprinklers,
Well, not just the sprinklers, but the
siding?
siding and stuff like that. So, Post Mountain, you're going to have a lot of homes that don't have defensible space because 4290 isn't going to apply. We took that out. They don't have home hardening. They don't have a water system. They don't have a road system. And, you're going to have, to me, I'm just worried that you're really putting people in jeopardy by saying, yeah, we really want to help you because you have smaller lots. We don't want you to have the same building standards as other people, but you're, okay, your life is in jeopardy. And I know our other commissioners are kind of like, well, that's up to them, right?
I hear you.
Very much so.
Very
We
much.
went through- Does it sound familiar? We went through this before.
Very much so.
I believe in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Okay.
It's like if I want to build my house on a
And burn
10-foot
up.
square pad, it was like, by golly, let me build it. It's like, that's how I feel, and I'm strong about this. Shall we get to battling this one out?
So my other thing is, the last time we discussed this, we hadn't gotten any input from the Fire Chiefs Association. And so, we had to go back to the Board of Supervisors, went to the Fire Chiefs Association and got a letter, opposing the ordinance. And then, anyway, so I'm just kind of, this is really giving me heartache. So I apologize. We're getting beyond technical questions. So do we have any more technical questions for?
A
Rachel?
clarification, the reason for if you don't have water and sewer, and if you do, is it because if you double the amount of potential buildings in an area that are connected, is there going to be enough to handle that water and sewer demand on the community system?
It's backwards.
No, it's not. If the community system is built for 100 houses and you all of a sudden make it 200 houses, then that system's overloaded. But if you have, but on a, I'm not saying that it's right either way. Sewers, if you have a septic tank, if your property perks for septic and it meets that requirement and it has access to water and it's zoned that way, then it should be able, they should be able to build on it.
But the proposed ordinance, so if you have a water and sewer system available, then the criteria, the limit stays at 5 acres.
Correct.
But if there's no water or sewer available, it drops to 2.5.
Right, but they still have to meet those parameters. They still have to be able to perk, they still have to have septic, and they still have to have water.
True.
And the other one is that it's a community system and they're putting a burden on that system. So you're actually, they're saying, hey, maybe we can't handle
Well,
10,
there's no
20.
community system.
Well, yeah, and that's why it's available there and it's not on the system. Because it's not on the system, because it's not on the system, if that 2.5 acres meets all the parameters for a structure, then or 5 acres, it doesn't matter which one it is, 5 acres, 2.5 acres. If it meets those needs and it's zoned that way, they should be able to build there. But if it's a community with a water system and a sewer system, a septic system, sewer system, it has a maximum capacity and they could be challenging that capacity.
Oh, I get it. Okay.
That's my understanding of why that's there.
I agree.
No, well, anyway. Okay, so other technical or clarifying questions for staff? All right, so do we have public comment in the room?
Thank you, Mitchell.
Hey, my name's Nick Chaponi, CAL FIRE, battalion chief here in Trinity. I thought I was coming to comment on 4290, but it sounds like 4290 is already out of this.
Yeah, they don't have the defensible space requirements. It's not in the current ordinance. They don't have to comply with that.
I'd strongly recommend at least access, egress, and signage at a minimum for their own protection and or safety. Mainly because myself, when I respond to an incident, I have to decide, and it's fine if you decide to, you guys will go whatever direction you want to go, but I'm the one that has to decide if I'm sending my troops there or not. And if I don't have good access or egress, I'm not sending my troops in there. I can't do that to their families. And that's understandable. That's a decision. I agree with you guys as well. As far as the making the lot smaller, when I remember that I was about maybe a year ago, I guess, I'm filling in for my partner right now. I do the fire and portion part of it and he fills in for me for that. And then he does the 4290, Greg. But what I would see the issue with going smaller when this was first brought up, if I'm not mistaken, it was for our rural areas that are larger properties that are well off the beaten path, I guess is the word I'll use. Not so much for an option to, I'll say, take a shortcut in a neighborhood, like, or 2-acre lots, where if you had 100 of these things pop up in Post Mountain, then you do have a big load with a lot less restrictions. I could see that being more of an issue versus your 10, 500-acre family-owned lands that they're so far out of a CSD or whatever. Anyways, it's honestly is not going to matter. So anyways, that's just my point to that. If they did decide, if you guys did decide to go down to that smaller lot, especially talking about the Post Mountain areas, or because it's more highly populated, it's rural, but it's not as rural as a lot of our other areas. I would definitely say, strongly recommend 4290 for roads, access, egress, because you're coming down a slightly decent main vein of a road, jumping off into maybe 10, 15 homes that you can't access. And basically what I have to do is we have to pull back to here, and all what's going to happen in there is going to happen. So signage, road, access, egress for the safety of the public, and then for the folks be it myself on the wildland side of things and our local fire departments going into medical aids. That was always my thing. I had to do defensible space inspections for years. And the best way I described it to folks, I was like, hey, could you at least put your address out for me so I can see it from both directions? I'm driving a 30,000-pound vehicle to your house when you called 911 and I can't see any. So I'm driveway stop, and they don't take off real good. They don't stop real good. So driveway stop, driveway. Oh, maybe that was it. Then I'm backing up trying to get, it just cuts seconds off of that, minutes. So as far as that's what I have. So anything for me other than.
Guys have any questions? Thank you.
Not for,
Right, appreciate it.
thank you, not for him.
Okay, do we have any public comment on Zoom?
John Brower.
Hello, Commissioners. John Brower from Junction City once again. I agree with the CAL FIRE representative that if this is going to be massaged to be able to include Post Mountain addresses, probably a pretty good idea. CAL FIRE, my understanding is no one has gone in to help Post Mountain the last 2 or 3 times it's burned. And they essentially have become their own sort of guerrilla style fire force. Post Mountain also benefits from literally hundreds of very high producing wells. It's a water rich area, and hundreds of permitted septic systems at this point. So a lot of those setbacks for septic and stuff have already been worked out. I think one of the things that confounded the supervisors was that many of the parcels in Post Mountain are a little less than 2 acres or just over 2 acres. And so as originally written at the 5 acres, folks would have to group up like 3+ parcels to be able to do Class K in Post Mountain. As it is currently drafted, it would probably take multiple doubling parcels. So conglomerating 2 parcels into one to be able to do one of these, as those parcel sizes are a lot smaller than most people realize. But this is essential. This has been part of the discussion for at least the 8 years that I've been paying attention to this issue since it first started making its way through the Planning Commission. And Post Mountain was always intended to build a benefit from this in some reasonable way, if that could be figured out. And so now it has. I recommend dropping the limit to either 2.5 acres or dropping the acreage limit entirely. There's at least 3 or 4 other counties in our region that have no minimum parcel size. Not just Shasta, but there are quite a few. There's Calaveras, Humboldt, Shasta, no parcel size. Shasta on the fire footprints, like Commissioner Fall mentioned. And then 2 other counties, Butte and Mendo, that are 1 acre minimums. And then only 2 counties, Armador and Mono, have larger acreages than that. So it'd be in keeping with what's happening in the rest of the state and the region to drop her down to 2.5 or even less. And as this issue has bounced its way through the Planning Commission for many years, one of the recurring themes is that the Lewiston and Trinity Center folks really don't feel like this is appropriate. And so, but the Pines do. So there needs to be a parcel size that reflects that. And it seems like the utility services also kind of help with that also, that distinction. Anyway, good luck with this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment on Zoom? No. Okay, so we'll bring it back to the commission for a motion.
I'll make a motion that we, where is the motion thing? that we recommend to the Board of Supervisors to adopt the resolution PC 2023-12. And it was like to amend chapter 515.25.03 to exempt the CEQA pursuant Public Resource Code of 15060C2. Activities will result in a direct, reasonable, foreseeable, indirect change in the environment, and the 5061 or 105.061B3, there's no possible activity or question may be any significant effect on the environment. But also I'd like to amend it to where I would like to see that we have no acreage limits upon the limiting the building, because it was like, I'll just, with no limiting, we'll get into the other minute.
Your motion is the staff recommendation with the amendment that there be no acreage limit.
Correct.
Do we have a second?
Had to say no acreage limit.
Well, the reason I say no acreage limits is because.
So wait, we can't have
okay.
discussion until we have a second.
Okay.
Okay,
I could say 1 acre, but I personally think no acreage limits.
okay. So that motion does not have a second. So do we have another
Did he,
motion?
did he amend it to 1 acre? I know.
I'll amend to 1 acre.
Okay, well, I'll second that then.
Okay.
Had to say none.
Okay, so we have a motion to adopt resolution PC 2023-12, recommending that the Board of Supervisors find that it's exempt from CEQA and that they approve an ordinance to amend the zoning code as identified in resolution number 2023-12 with the amendment that there be the minimum parcel size be 1 acre. Okay, discussion. So that is really scary from a fire department. Because I know you guys, so like I said, other counties have lower size limits, like Shasta County has 1 acre, but it's for a very small area. And within that very small area, they still have to comply with the state standards on construction to prevent wildfires, and they have to comply with 4290. So you're saying Trinity County, only 1 acre, and you don't have to build your house in a way that protects you from wildfire or your neighbors, or even simple stuff like you don't have to have a bedroom window egress. As a firefighter, when they took that out, that scares the crap out of me. I mean, the things that we did that weakened that rule.
Mhm.
I mean, people's lives are at risk, and you guys, I know you're like, well, that's okay, that's up to them if they want to risk their lives, but I am just not there, because that's not what happens. They call me and they say, come rescue me, and my guys are putting themselves at risk trying to rescue people who did stupid stuff. So
Well,
obviously I'm not happy with the 1 acre.
Well, I get that. I get that. And it was like, but also it comes down to the point, like you said, it's like, if a person, like, I live in Ruth for a reason. I really do. And it was like, you know what? It was like, but the thing also is, it's like, there are places in Ruth. And the reason that I had originally said no acreage limit, because there's this stretch real close to the church Granted, it's in the first fire, in Whitey's fire, I forget what year it was, that he did a thing and it was like it burned up a bunch of houses. They went back, they burnt, or it's like they rebuilt, then they went through and it was like, and then when the last one, the August complex happened, when the Forest Service burned us out, we lost 2 more houses during that thing. But I'll say this, it was like each of those parcels, there's nothing to burn there now. And for 2, it was like those people have houses and they're gonna, it's like,
But does that represent the rest of the county, all the 1-acre parcels where this might apply?
it was like, but this is what happens to us. Like if you have a piece of property and say you want to live in Ruth and you want to be out, and you know what? And it's like, I want to be out there, but it's like, this is what I could afford and stuff like that. And then you build and you're living your life. Granted, you might be, if you do it wisely, it was like, you know what? You will do well.
If I may.
Yes, please, Commissioner Barrett.
Trinity County is always told that we're unique. Normal things don't happen in Trinity County. Lot lines are not square like they are in other counties. So I feel it's often incorrect to compare us to what other counties do. My thoughts on today's, without getting too far down the rabbit hole, today's society depends on someone else rescuing them. You should be able to self-rescue. It's your own fault. If you do stupid things, stupid should hurt. That's my opinion. You should be able to buy a piece of property, cut down the timber, harvest it, and sustainably live on your own land that you have purchased to live freely. I disagree with, I agree with Commissioner Ellis's analogy about the water. I agree with all of it.
I agree.
If I understand what the firefighter said about having an address on, that's common sense. Like you should have an address at your house to show. If you don't and they drive by your house and your house burns down, well, there's your consequence.
Correct.
So this is hands down the most controversial or the most inquired about activity that I've been involved with as a planning commissioner is Class K housing. In my opinion, Trinity County is desperate for homes, affordable homes. We have people that own property that are staying in travel trailers. In my opinion, I wouldn't put a dog in because they're not allowed to build a house on there because they can't afford to do it. So Class K housing, if you want to look at it as homesteading, we talked about sustainable, local harvested food. It's along that same lines. Build your house, lead your life, and take responsibility for your own actions.
I agree.
You had a question about the tax base. Well, I can tell you the realtors oppose this because you can't get insurance for these homes because they're not built to standards.
You can't get insurance in Ruth anyhow, whether if you have a good home or you have a bad home.
Okay.
I'm sorry for cutting you off, but it was like, but that's just the fact of the matter in Ruth.
And the value of the homes, you have to have a thing recorded that says it wasn't built to building standards. So there's a liability kind of waiver for the county because if that house falls down and kills people, we're not responsible. I don't know that that's the kind of thing we want on our tax base. That would be my answer to your question.
Supervisor Wilburn, George Wilburn, years ago, that's Supervisor Frazier's grandfather. Him and I were having a conversation when he said that they had actually passed it, but it never got recorded when he was a supervisor. And he even mentioned the thing. He says, he says, what about if we make a Class K deal and we get that passed? And he says, if the house falls down and injures, or if it just falls down, we'll make it a misdemeanor. What do you think of that one? It's like, put a misdemeanor upon it. But the thing is, it's like,
people to move into this county and have no confidence at all that their house that they're moving into is safe.
No, Bill, because I'll tell you this, it's like the people that I know that are moving into this county want to move here. And this is why I live here. I don't want to live and raise my kids outside of this county. I'm here for the long haul. And it was like, and there was a time when I was logging and stuff like that. And the lady says, Todd, do you know you can make way more money out of Ruth? I said, yeah, I can make way more money out of Ruth, but it's like, I want to raise my kids here. I'm here forever. And it was like, I don't desire to sell my house. I don't desire to move off. In fact, I have kids who are like, Dad, where will I be able to build a house? And it was like, where can I do it? And why they want to live here, and they would rather just homestead a little piece of property where they live in a, I wouldn't say a piece of junk because we wouldn't build them a piece of junk, but the thing they want to live in a nice little cabin where they can raise their own food, have a few animals and do that. And they're perfectly content of not having all the fancy bells and whistles. But the thing is, they love Ruth and they hate the outside world.
I think it's also wrong to report Class K housing as being lean-to shacks and tents and horrible buildings. Class K housing, if you look at some of the models that have passed in other counties or other areas, people are building beautiful custom homes.
Correct.
Log cabins and as such. And to say that people come here to not feel safe in this county, you could argue that some people come to the state to not feel safe. The crimes and different dangers that we don't face in Trinity County are very real and very dangerous to those people living there. So if people choose to buy a piece of property, they build it, and they choose to raise their family there, who are we to tell them no? And I think it's wrong to report these houses as these lean-to shacks in the woods.
Well, that's not what I'm saying, but I'm just saying they are not obligated to comply with a lot of building standards. And particularly, they are not obligated to apply with the building standards that would keep them safe in a wildfire, or that would aid fire or emergency responders in helping them. If I can't get to them because there's no window in the bedroom and I can't break into the bedroom and pull them out through the window and they're going to die, okay, that's their fault, but I'm still trying and my guys get hurt. That's my point. Okay, and I don't want to belabor this, so let's.
May I share another thought? This is my personal experience, okay? When it was like my house has windows in all the rooms, it has all the stuff, everything's supposed to. But the thing is, when the fire happened out there where we were at, and I'll tell you, the Forest Service were the ones who burnt my property out. There's video footage of them doing the drip line down at the road, and it went up and it burned us out. But the thing was, it was like a Forest Service, I don't know if it was a Forest Service, but it was some firefighter person came up. We had the volunteer fire engine at my house and all that. And this guy comes up and I said, oh boy, am I glad to see you. He says, oh, I'm not going to be here. Don't worry about that. I was just wondering, is there anything you want? Out there in our neck of the woods, Carol, we don't have the luxury of you is the thing, is the fire people out there. We have people, it's like they were burning us out. And it was like, that's the truth too. And the thing is, it's like, we had our neighbors helping us, one help another with another. I had to take a back road, an old skid road out of my property so that because our fire access had been cut off.
Well, I'm just talking about the volunteer firefighters that are volunteers and putting their lives on the line, trying to keep their neighbors safe. I'm not talking about the Forest Service or anybody else.
But I'm a volunteer also, and I was doing the same thing for my neighbors as well.
That's my point. You're trying to help them. You're not saying you're on your own.
But it's like, but they were helping me. I was helping them. That's where it gets back to like in the general plan and the community thing, where it's like, if we would love our neighbors and we'd treat our neighbors right instead of have the bickering among all the communities, oh, this guy he grows pot or whatever. If we just love our neighbors, and then when an incident happens, we come together. Right now, we're in the middle of having our own plan over there in Ruth right now. And the plan has nothing to do with the county or whatever. It's like, what's going to happen when things get bad? And it was like, and the plan is the community coming together, and it's like, and being there and having each other's back.
That's great.
And it was like, and that's what, and it's like, and so, but that's what I desire. It's like, to where it's like, where you can have people who can live a life. And it was like, and it was like, not everybody who comes to Ruth is going to have a big retirement and stuff like that. It was like, there's places in Ruth, I have to be 100% honest with you. those were houses have been there for years. And all the homemade pharmaceuticals that have been done there and everything else, it was like people wish that it had prayed that it had burnt down during the fire. But it was one of the ones that was saved. And it was like, and it's a terrible look of on the community. But the thing is, it was like also though, it's like people should have an opportunity to be able to go out there and try to have an American dream. And it was like, I desire to better myself and better the community. And that's what I think that, because I have a personal friend right now, because we were talking about acreage size. She bought a piece of property before the K-housing thing went through. 4.5 acres. And it was a little piece. It's surrounded by 160 acres and she doesn't qualify. She has this massive stream that runs through her place year round. And it was like, and she doesn't qualify for K-housing.
She would if it was 2.5 acres. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. Do we have any further discussion?
Yes.
Commissioner Ellis.
So all points are valid, guys. I agree with everything you said, but the problem is the community. Other people are involved in it too. The choices that people make on their properties do affect other people's properties too. And also the Board of Supervisors is more prepared to accept something like 2.5 acres. And it's a closer call than what you got right now. They're not going to accept one, no matter what you think. And then the other point, I think I lost it. So we want this thing to go through, right? You want K-housing to happen. And if you bought a parcel hoping to do that before it was in, that was a hope. It's a crapshoot, and it's only one style of building anyway. Yes, it reduces some things, but it's not for everybody anyway. I don't believe that everybody's going to come in and go, I want to do a K-house in Trinity County. I don't think that's the issue. Post Mountain, I don't know what the zoning is. Is it all rural residential? Or
Rural residential.
it's mostly?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry?
Pretty much.
Okay. And again, this is something we're bringing in that's hopefully going to help. And I think 2.5 acres is a lot better than 5. Yeah, is it going to get everyone? No, nothing does. You can't just give it to everybody. It doesn't happen. It's not reality.
I think I agree with you. I think if I can, how do I back out of seconding his motion?
We can just do a
We can
new
just
one.
vote on it. Or do you want to do a subsequent
Could we make a
substitute?
subsequent motion?
We can make motions all night. Right?
Because may I share something?
Yeah.
I appreciate what you said, Don. And it was like you saw a bigger picture that I wasn't, because I'll be honest with you, with this, it's like you probably don't know, but it's like I'm kind of bullheaded on this. Because it's like I think everybody should be able to, but it's like, but when you throw out the perspective that it was like, if we want it passed, the Board of Supervisors will probably be more apt to go with the 2.5 than the 1. And so if I could take back what I said of the 1 acre deal and make it the 2.5, it was like on the wisdom and the logic of what you shared there, it's like I can go along with that. And I'd be willing to make that subsequent motion over the motion that I made with that wisdom that you shared there, Don.
Or I believe you can withdraw your motion if the seconder also withdraws.
Okay, I'll withdraw.
Okay, so we're back to square one. So commissioners, what is your preference? Do you have a motion?
I would like to make a motion that we accept it at the 2.5 acre parcel.
Okay, so Commissioner Heaton,
Oh,
that the planning commissioner,
Yep.
you'll correct me if I'm wrong, Commissioner Heaton moves that the planning commission adopt resolution PC 23-12 with the recommendations A and B to the Board of Supervisors.
Yeah, with down to the 2.5 acre.
That's what
Parcel's
the,
in there, yeah.
Beautiful.
do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Barrett. Okay, do we have any discussion on that motion by Commissioner Heaton?
No. I think
Okay,
it's-
so I believe that's a roll call vote.
Commissioner Barrett, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Heaton, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Ellis, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Fall, Chair Fall, how do you vote?
No, regretfully, I'm still worried about fire.
All right, so the motion passes 3-1.
Okay, so that concludes item number 6. Planning Commissioner reports. Do we have any reports by planning commissioners?
No, just to get what we last discussed, moving through, a lot of interest in Class K housing. And a lot of people will be happy to see that we helped it along a little bit today.
It does have to go back to the Board of Supervisors for that amendment.
Helped it along.
I do have a report. I was invited to a meeting in Lewiston for folks who are discussing the procedure for establishing opt-outs and the general plan boundaries. So that's where I heard a lot of the comments about including Pine Cove Resort and the area from 299 North versus the current boundaries of the Lewiston Community Plan is a lot narrower. So anyway, just listening, I was trying to explain what does the Planning Commission do? And then just listening to those community comments. So that's my report. Planning Director's report. Are you now the department? So what is your new title?
All right.
Director of the Planning and Building Department or
No,
what's
it's-
Deputy Director of
Development Department.
Community Development?
Yep.
Okay,
So
cool.
finally, but you know, you don't look a gift horse in the mouth and I really appreciate it. So here we are finally. So I wanted to give a public service announcement tonight that after, 15 years of trying to find a planner, a senior planner, we actually did interviews this past week and it just seems like 15 years. But we actually made a job offer to a senior planner and it was accepted today. And without further ado, the person that's going to be the senior planner in the planning division of the Community Development Department come 1 December, Bella Headkey.
All right.
Oh, Bella. That is so awesome.
Congratulations.
But now we got to replace Bella.
But I'll be there to help replace them.
Okay, we promise. Congratulations, that is awesome.
Yes. So it's a new day and hopefully we're going to be getting some movement on some projects going forward soon, medium, and then later on as well. So it's a new day. So we're very enthused and we want to get some real traction on some stuff. And that's all I have for this time.
I just had a question. Did the county council ever answer your question about whether or not there could be a representative of the fire chiefs and CAL FIRE on the subdivision review committee?
Yes.
Yes, and the answer was
Yes.
yes.
Only one vote. If there's a voting situation, only one vote, but there's no issue with having both.
Like have an alternate
Yep.
kind of thing. So does that go back to the Board of Supervisors to confirm that nomination, right? Because they have to appoint the person.
Well, it was, okay, so let me back up. So we had talked about the two people And those two people they can go now with the recommendation of the planning commission to go to the board of supervisors for basically acceptance.
So do
be on
you,
the
do you
subdivision.
agenda that?
Yep.
Okay, so
Yep.
you'll put it on the agenda that,
Yep.
so that, because I want to get that subdivision review committee established so they can start meeting. So the final step in that is getting that appointment confirmed by the board of supervisors.
Correct.
Okay, cool. I think Bill will be happy. Any other questions for our Deputy Director of Community Development Services? Community Development. Community Development Department. Okay. Having no more questions, the Planning Commission meeting is adjourned at 9:50. I can't even see anymore, 9:51. Thank you.